Oh, snap. Can you hear
Oh,
me
there it
now?
is. Yeah, I can
Why
hear you
would
now.
why would it mute me as soon as I'm telling you, the demons and devils are trying to stop us,
It's
you know?
just yeah, it's just the devil trying to stop us because this podcast is gonna be so amazing. That was such a sweet intro. I feel like, like before a basketball game, you gotta play like I grew up in the '90s, you gotta play Tootsie Roll. And like that intro is fantastic, and like I'm so pumped up now for the conversation.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. I've had it for years. It's one of my older intros. And you are Brittney Hartley, is what I was saying when I couldn't speak at the moment. Welcome to Myth Vision for your first time.
Yeah, so glad to be here.
Again, in advance, ladies and gentlemen, if we have technical difficulties, we are live, and sometimes the YouTube daemonies do not want us to say what we want to say. Brittney has quite an interesting story. I know that because I've done a little peeking behind the curtain, so to speak, and have seen some of her work. First thing I want to do before we begin on your story, Brittney, if it's possible, is just to plug you. I want to grow your presence on YouTube, and you have 69.5K subscribers. You should be past 100K by now. You come with so much insight, so much. I cannot begin to put into words what you bring to the table in terms of this discussion and what we're going to be sharing today. I hope people will subscribe to your YouTube channel. Do you have plans to do some big stuff eventually, maybe here?
Yeah, I kind of got my start more on TikTok, and so I have a pretty big presence on TikTok, and just started in the past year. I don't even think I'm a year old trying to do YouTube and do some longer content. So I'm still figuring it out, but I hope people find things that are helpful in there, and would love to have a channel someday that is really as successful as you're doing, and all the conversations that you're having that are just so important.
I think you will. And I don't think, as we spoke before, I know you have it. And it is special. You also have a website, no nonsense spirituality.com, deconstructing landing page here, it looks like. Is this different from your course page?
So yeah, I have a lot of courses, and I made the courses because I have too many clients to see as a spiritual director, and we'll talk about what that means and go into that. But I have too long of a waiting list of people who want to work one on one with me than I can see. And
Mhm.
so a lot of the themes that I talk about over and over, which includes nihilism, feminine spirit, paths of feminine spirituality, secular spirituality, and religious deconstruction, are kind of the four areas that I work with the most. And so I created some courses of things that I often do with my clients, just for the people that I'm not able to work with one on one.
I would like to know who Brittney is, where she's from, who her parents were, how devout were you? Did you really, really, really believe? And then we go through your life and unravel that story many people will relate to. Without further ado, Brittney, let me shut up and just hand it to you.
All right. Yeah, I'll just kind of do as short a version of my story as I can, and then just open it up to where you want to go with that. But I can't really describe what I do without kind of starting at the beginning, which was that I was raised Mormon, so I was raised LDS, and I was a believer. I had a typical Mormon childhood. My home wasn't abusive in any way; it was a lovely childhood. And by the time I was about 13, I started asking some more serious questions of my faith, and found that there were not good answers to my questions. So by the time I was 14, I was deconstructing Mormonism, which led to me getting kicked out of my home when I was 15 years old. Or six, I think by then I was 16 years old. And then was really in quite a lot of chaos in what I want to do with my life now that I've been removed from my home. And that was quite traumatic for me. And I had this thought, which was, looking back, is like a thought only a teenager could have, because it's so egotistical and hubristic. But it's like, oh, I just probably have the wrong religion, and I seem to have fucked up my life pretty good here. So I just need to figure out what's true. And then once I figure out what's true, I'll know how to pattern my life accordingly. I'll just figure it out. Nobody else has figured it out. I'll figure it out. And so by the time I was 17 years old, I would be what you would call now like a nuanced Christian. Like there's something deeper to Christianity than the childlike version that I was given or the Mormon version that I was given when I was Mormon. So I was reading C.S. Lewis and apologetics, and I went into history and philosophy. I eventually went into theology school, and I really very much cared about these questions of what is, and what is the right way to live a life, and what is right and wrong, and what is God, and what is reality. And I just thought about these questions every minute of every day. And I really went to theology school not because I was an atheist trying to prove God wrong. I went to, theology school to get closer to God, to understand the scriptures more.
Mm.
I was in a Christian marriage. I was teaching seminary, and teaching the scriptures to teenagers as my job. And eventually, I deconstructed Mormonism. I started to deconstruct Christianity and some of the, especially historical claims around Christianity. I started to get more nuanced and more nuanced. And then I started to really deconstruct even the concept of God. And by the time it was time to write my dissertation in theology school, I had to admit to myself that I had lost my faith in God. And, people can sometimes see some of my more spicy videos on social media and just assume that I never had faith or I never wanted to know God, and I'm just like a smart ass atheist. But like I was all in, and I wanted it to be true. And me losing my faith at the time was very destructive to my life. I lost my job. I was losing my marriage. I didn't know how the hell to raise kids. I didn't know what was up and what was down. I in no way wanted to lose my faith at the time.
Mm.
And it was very difficult for me. And so for a couple of years there, like some people, when they leave religion, they just like find just so much freedom and joy, and they're just off running, and like they just have unicorns and rainbows for the rest of their life. I know some people who just really instantly do well outside of religion once they leave it. And I'm not taking anything away from that experience. That just was not my experience. For me, it was a struggle. Like the death of God was a struggle for me,
You were
because with the
mourning
death,
that. Yeah.
yeah, I was deeply mourning that, because with God is also like you have to confront death and the loss of objective morality and the loss of objective truth and the loss of some identity and like there was just so many losses, the loss of my community, the loss of my marriage at the time. Like I really did, in that death of God, kind of lose everything.
Mm.
And so for me, it was very painful. It led to a couple years of really deep existential crisis and nihilism. Uh, and for me, that included suicidality. Like it was a pretty dark time for me. And the hardest thought at the time, and I just try to say this not to bring people down, but like I just want to be honest about it. My darkest thought at the time is that if we are just kind of evolutionary meat suits, and you have to kill conscious life, even as a vegan, you're killing conscious life in some way in order to live, and we don't have free will, then I'm essentially trapped in this robot, in this meat suit, this violent kind of body, and I didn't consent to be here. And maybe the most moral thing to do would be to withdraw my consent to living in a universe like this with this level of suffering. And it was very difficult to wrestle with just the morality of being alive.
Mm.
I was reading some pretty dark nihilistic philosophers at the time, and really wrestling with the ethics of what it is to be alive in a universe that has this much violence and suffering just kind of baked into the system. And over time, I found a lot of tools for existential crisis and tools for meaninglessness, tools for facing death. We have 4 existential fears. I did a lot of work there. I got a lot of tools from philosophy and absurdism and existentialism, and even in religion and Buddhism and mysticism and Stoicism, and there's just a lot of tools for how people have dealt with existential crisis. And I really dove into that, and my life got better, and I got to create this job in this one life that I have, where I just have this one life. What do I want to do with it? And the thing that I most wanted to do is, how can I do spirituality, the good life, helping people through existential crisis without pushing people to God, especially if they don't believe in God? How could I do this in a way that I could meet someone wherever they are as
Mm,
far as beliefs in God, and be able to help in ways that religion is not being able to meet people? Because with religion, they'll give you tools for existential crisis, but you have to believe truth claims first. And so I was able to create this job. I took a risk and I said, I'm an atheist spiritual director. I really value so many tools in spirituality and religion and philosophy. I'm just not a believer, but there are tools here that are helpful. And I started talking about it, and because the meaning crisis is much bigger than like just Mormons, going through a deconstruction, I was resonating with a lot of people, and was able to create now a full-time job where I do some still religious deconstruction, but the most of what I do is like existential crisis and nihilism help for people who can't believe but are struggling.
mm.
So that was a lot. Where do you want to go with that?
Well, I
That's
mean,
kind
there's
of my
a lot.
story.
Yeah, there's a lot there. My goodness. I almost want to go through a little bit of that with you
Yeah.
for people to see closer, because you went through that pretty quick. You got to 14 within 60 seconds, and it's like, okay, would you say that your life was like you were very devout even as a young Mormon, and you took that seriously?
Yeah, yeah, and I've just found out that I'm on the autism spectrum, which is new information for me. I just turned 40, and my family members were getting tested and coming up with autism, so I recently got tested. And what we do find with people who are on the spectrum is that when they're in religion, they tend to take it very seriously. It can almost even tend towards fundamentalism,
Mm,
because you get less of like the gray mental gymnastics. It's, I believe this, but I don't really believe this, kind of social aspects of religion. So when I was in religion, I took it very seriously, like as if it is the most important thing, as if these things are capital T true. And then, like a lot of people who are autistic, like when you leave, you kind of make the swing more towards atheism. So what we see when we see people on the spectrum in the data is that there's some conglomeration who tend towards fundamentalism and take beliefs really seriously, or full on atheist, kind of secular, but not a lot in the in between space, because that's just like a lot of social negotiations
mm,
that just aren't as resonant. So, yeah, when I was in it, I was really in it. Like I really believed it. I was a kid who was trying to figure out, I was reading uh these books that you wouldn't recognize because you're not Mormon, but like I was reading this book called Mormon Doctrine. I remember when I was a young child, I was trying to figure out. I remember I have this memory of being very young, and there was the word cherubim that we read in the scriptures in class, and I was like, well, what the hell is that? I got to figure that out. So like I took it very seriously, and I really did believe, and my beliefs were very important to me at the time.
yeah, you got me thinking I need to get tested. 'Cause I mean, I was completely sold out, completely. But I also wonder if there's a part of it is, I dealt with a lot of trauma growing up,
Mm,
alcoholism
mm,
and stuff too. So, and my father was my hero. He was a Green Beret in the Special Forces. So he was like Billy Badass of military. And like, there's a sense in which when I heard the message of a father who loves you unconditionally,
mm,
that message resonated with me. But I also was so into it, I couldn't help but look around and think they're all lukewarm. They're not really
mm,
like
mhm,
it was like they're not really looking at it. They're not seeing it.
mhm,
They're not really. And then when I left, I felt the same way. I'm looking at it going, you've been a Baptist your whole life, or you've been a Catholic your whole life. Like you've been told what to believe, and you literally bought the entire package and never questioned the environment. You were in Plato's cave and never saw the sun. That's how I felt.
mm.
Um,
It's so funny with Plato's Cave, because every single person, wherever they are in their journey, feels like they're the ones that have left the cave and are, in the sunlight. And it's this funny thing that like Christians and atheists and Muslims, like, we all think that we're the ones who've left the cave.
of course, of course.
And yeah,
Yeah, I use the analogy because, at first I used it like, oh, I see reality. As much as a
yeah,
primate risen on this planet can, in my mind, I
mhm,
think we're looking at
mhm,
the closest we can empirically, right? But truth be told, I think we're all, in a sense, delusional to
yeah,
some degree. We're still in a
yeah,
delusion. We're making sense of reality. We're trying to take shortcuts in our brain
yeah,
to try and put things together. And like, this is why I really like when you brought up spirituality, and we had a super chat already just to show, Solera Knight some love. Brittney, what does it mean to be spiritually married to multiple women within modern Mormonism, sealed in the temple? I guess this is some insider talk with Mormon theology, because I know they get away from polygamy, at least in the mainstream versions of it. But I also just want to mention spirituality. People hear that word, they think religion, they think, oh my gosh, you're trying to build a cult. They don't understand. So I don't know if you want to address this super chat for Solera first.
Yeah.
He's keeping the lights
I'll
on,
do the super chat first, and then I'll go into what I mean when I say I'm a spiritual atheist.
Yes.
Which I think is going to resonate with a lot of where you're at too. So polygamy was a big part of my deconstruction when I was Mormon. It's just very concerning that God seemed to be talking to Joseph Smith all the time and never told him, like, hey, like, maybe not the 14-year-olds, like, you know what I mean? It was very troubling for me. And in Mormonism, we don't have in the mainstream LDS tradition, we don't have men who are married to multiple living women at one time. But, the time I was Mormon, if I were to die and my husband were to get remarried, he would get remarried in the temple and a woman would be sealed to him. And so he would be essentially, even today, have this expectation that he would have two wives in heaven. So our previous prophet, President Nelson, and the current prophet, the President Oaks, they both have two wives that they are sealed to. Now, it wasn't at the same time, but they have all anticipation to going to heaven and having two wives there. So polygamy is still baked into Mormonism, but we have, like, at least very publicly said, like, we're not doing this and we don't do this at the same time. But if my husband were to die, if I were to get remarried, it would be like at a courthouse because I could not be sealed to another man. So there's still polygamy in Mormonism, even if publicly the PR team says, no, we don't do that anymore. It's still really baked into LDS theology. So what I mean by spirituality and religion are notoriously hard to define in the field of, religion and theology and cognitive science of religion, because it's really hard to find an umbrella term that applies to all the different all the different ways that people express religiosity and spirituality. Because sometimes there is a God, sometimes it's non-theistic. And so it's hard to define, but the best definition really for spirituality is that you are connecting outside of you and you're connecting deeper inside of you. That's why spirituality has a lot of labyrinths or spirals or eyes that you see in various traditions. It's this concept of connection outside of you. For some people, that includes a supernatural. For me, it doesn't. And then also connection to the universe inside of you. And so when you're not spiritual, you're disconnected to outside of you and everything going on outside of you and relationships and nature and universe and all of that. And you're also disconnected to the universe going on within you, and you're numb and you're cut off. That would be a lack of spirituality. So spirituality for me just means connection. Being an atheist spiritual person, all that says is, hey, there's a lot of tools here that have been housed in the houses of religion. There's a lot of tools in spirituality. Even if you are just like the most science-driven person, we have solid science showing that things like rituals are very helpful for you. Or there's science showing that people who have religion live longer, or they have better formed communities, or and so there's science. There's even science showing, like, hey, there's something here when we talk about ritual or awe or states of transcendence or love or collecting wisdom. Like there's things here worth holding on to. I just want to do it without any truth claims. Like, my confidence comes from not because I know what's going on with ultimate reality. I admit that I don't. I just don't think you do either. I just don't think anyone else does either. So can we get all those tools for the good life, all the tools that are beneficial in religion and spirituality, and not have to jump through hoops of having to believe things that are unbelievable to get those tools? And that's really what's important to me.
I listened to your video this morning that kind of goes through how theology school pretty much made you not believe in God. I mean, as you kind of briefly summarized here in this discussion, how it caused you to really rethink and go, hold on, I don't believe this. This is not believable now. Textual criticism, history. I mean, the list can go on and on. Philosophy. There were so many problems looking at religion and humans in an not anthropomorphic, like an anthropological approach. Combine that with a psychological kind of analysis, you start to realize really quickly it's human all the way through. But I got to a place where you could hear the chip on my shoulder, and I'm venting about this, and I'm constantly critiquing, and rightly so, pointing out flaws, issues, ethical problems, you name it, that we find within the religions. But then it's like you hit this wall and you go, well, we evolved. A lot of this is part of what made us successful as humans. Is it all bunk? And you're pointing out there's something to a lot of this that we shouldn't throw away. Maybe you called it the baby in the bathwater, and throw away the bathwater maybe, but there's still a baby there that is you can use. And I think that's important when we start to discuss, how you've exited but then found peace. Because a lot of people are dealing with a lack of meaning or purpose, a sense of community, since leaving the faith, whatever that faith may be, Islam, Christianity, Mormonism, the list can go on and on.
Yeah. So is there can you maybe narrow down a question there for me? There's so many directions that I could go there.
I hit a lot there. I mean, I guess I would say is, you hear apologists. I'm going to phrase it this way, and then hopefully there's a decent question in this. I've heard apologists when they're debating atheists. For example, Inspiring Philosophy. He's a buddy of mine. We're friends. We've had beef. Okay, we've had our problems over a debate over Dionysus and all this kind of stuff, and other things in the past where we're wrestling over ideas. But then he debates atheists, and he brings up these studies all the time to point out the utility, how religion has utility. What are you doing? Like this is better. Life is better. The world would be better with religion. And he uses this against the atheist who's going on there going, but it's not true. But it's not true.
Yeah.
And we hear this tension. How do you deal with that tension in your mind?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I feel like in the early 2000s, in the Christopher Hitchens phase of atheism, when he was just his verbal prowess was just really unmatched in these debates. There was the sense that we were debating whether or not a religion was true or whether or not we have strong enough evidence for God. And atheism did really well in those debates. Christopher Hitchens did really well in those debates. And then what happened is, especially in the past 10 years with Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson types, is we started to shift the conversation to religion is useful, or society needs religion. And it's a very interesting shift in the atheist conversation where it seems like they lost a lot of ground as far as being able to prove that there's some objective truths here that we can build on. I feel like they lost that debate. But the debate that's still worth having, where they have more data than, trying to go up against Christopher Hitchens, is this idea that religion is useful and that human beings have co-evolved with it. And there's certain aspects of it that perhaps we need. And I think atheists are too quick to just throw all that away because it's related to God. And so it's just all bullshit. They do have some data. There is some science. So if you're a science-driven person, you have to take that science seriously. And so what I want to do is what Christians will say is, religions are useful because of XYZ, and here's some data. Therefore, you should go to church and my God is real. And I say, no, that doesn't have to be the case. We can admit that we co-evolved with religion. We can admit that there's certain failures so far in secularism. The best example of this is Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who was the fifth new atheist, in addition to the other four, outspoken atheist, poster child of being an ex-Muslim. She spends a couple years in secularism, finds that it's very empty, kind of has some depression and existential crisis, and today she's a practicing Christian. Not because she believes that it's she didn't have this big conversion where Jesus came and talked to her and she believes it's true. There just wasn't enough in secularism for her to feel like life was really worth living, or that we could be able to combat political religions. And she had, a lot of political arguments there. So there is like, that's where the debate is happening today, is it seems to be no more about like what's capital T true, because I do feel like religion did poorly in those conversations, but there is something to be said for, hey, religion has been the place where we have kept things like awe and transcendence and ritual and community and moral education and wisdom, and there's so much that religion was doing that we didn't realize that it was doing by just saying, is it true? And Alain de Botton is a really great philosopher for this space, because he's an
Who is?
atheist, he's a philosopher. His name is Alain de Botton,
Okay.
and he has a great TED talk called Atheism 2.0. And he also has a book called Religion for Atheists. But he has this great point that says, whether or not a religion is true is almost the most boring question that you could ask of it. Like, Mormonism is one of the easiest religions to say that, like, we can have some pretty strong evidence that this is not the one true religion. But the deeper question that I feel like more atheists need to consider is that, what was Mormonism doing that makes it so that it's psychologically beneficial for people? And what is secularism not doing so that people in secularism don't have the level of community and psychological stability that Mormons have, or the longevity, or all these things that Mormons can in the data say, like, we have this because of our religion. So I take that seriously. I don't dismiss that. I don't dismiss the argument that there are aspects of religion that may be good for people. My thing is, that doesn't mean go back to religion and pretend you believe these unbelievable stories and try to gaslight yourself back to belief. I don't think that that's the answer. I don't think
Yeah.
the answer is go back to these, Iron Age gods, and because there's so many problems with that. The path that I see moving forward is like, yes, we seem to have co-evolved with religion in ways that there are some tools here that seem to be helpful for people and society. Can we get a better sense of these tools and have them more present in society, in secularism, so we don't have to go back to pretending to believe in order to get those tools? So I'm not arguing with the Christian or the apologist that there's tools in religion that we have data that shows are helpful for people. I'm just saying, what do we do with that data? Because I don't think that means go back to religion. I just
Wow.
think that means there's tools here that are worth taking seriously.
That's a very difficult process. I mean, there's a lot of ego involved in these debates. You know what I mean? There's a lot of
I know. That's why I don't debate. I'm getting too old.
I hear
I'm getting
you.
too old to debate.
No, I hear you. I see the tension there. And that's a struggle. That's such a struggle because, I think that's why Ayan Hirsi Ali literally, I don't want to say she doesn't believe. I think that her motivated reasons for choosing one is that she realized one isn't going to win over the other, at least as far as she could tell. Now she's like, I think she's turning off her critical faculties and like just trying to like indulge into like
Yeah.
naive child faith kind of thing to purposefully believe, and it's helping her.
Can't you
Where
see? Yeah, can't you see with her that, like, it almost feels like she split her brain in two, in the sense that, like, when she talks now, it's very much like, I keep science brain over here, and over here I do Christianity. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
for me, that I don't want to have to do that. I don't want to have to split myself in two in order to get tools for existential crisis, because that to me is such a lack of wholeness, that she, in order to survive the existential crisis that she was in, had to turn off her brain in
Mhm.
order to access this other side where she could participate in faith and get the benefits from religion. That just doesn't feel like the answer to me.
Yeah, I think we're testing something quite new in this way. Like we're like the science experiment with what you're describing here, because we're trying to see if there's a way that we can actually hijack the utility of all the things that are good and purposeful, from ethics to you name it, right? But outside of the framework of religion. And it almost makes me think, well, why don't we just stop and make a new religion at this point that just has myths that we say are myths and aren't literal,
Mm.
and they
Mhm.
encode our ethics, but they're not to be taken as dogmas. And the problem
Yeah.
is, as you point out, is there's almost like a precept that comes into this where you have to presuppositionally believe these things are true in order to really devout and be so dedicated and devoted to it, you need to almost be delusionally, sucked into thinking it's real in order for that to be the
Yeah.
case. And
That's a
I don't.
really hard that's such a hard lesson for atheists to learn, especially ones who are newly out of deconstruction. I probably get an email a day that's like, "Why don't we just create everything good that Mormonism was?" Because when you're in that community, it is such a fantastic community to be a part of when it's working for you. When you're
Mm,
not gay, like when it's working for you, it is great as far as the level of community. And I have so many people, especially early on in deconstruction, that say like, we'll just build that without the bullshit. And what more atheists need to realize, I think, is we're running up against a problem and
mm,
that secularism is failing in some of its promises. And we need to be honest about it. If we expect Christians to be honest about their doubts, we need to be honest about what's going on our side too, which is we're coming up against this problem with human nature that we can say we're going to gather as a community and we're going to have these rituals and we're going to collectively teach our kids good things, but without the dogma piece, you don't tap into the human brain enough to get the outpouring of money and time and resources to make that community go. So
mm.
something like secular humanism that operates like Mormonism or Catholicism, I actually don't think is possible. It doesn't tap into that culty side of the human brain enough. And when you don't have, and this goes back to kind of the book Sapiens and some of the ideas in there, it's that we seem to have done community always with a collective myth. And so when you're trying to do secularism and get all the good things out of religion without the collective myth, it's very hard to create community. One of my master's program classes was tracking all of the churches that were trying to do something like Atheist Church. And within 5 years, it was like 90% of them had gone belly up. By 10 years, they had all failed. Like it's too hard. People without really actually believing it will just decide on Sunday that they'd rather just take a watch and take a walk and watch some Netflix instead. Like,
Yeah.
and so there's something where it's like I'm even willing to say that because of what human nature is, it's possible that religion will just win by default because it just taps into that culty dogmatic side of the human brain that garners so much money and power and resources. And then they have more children and then they have more communities to raise those children. And like, I'm not on the secularism side because I have this idea that there's some secular utopia that I think is going to win. I'm on the side even knowing that it's probable that secularism may lose as far as like global, worldwide, the future of
Right.
humanity. I just feel like for me in my individual life, I feel a lot better and a lot more wholeness and a lot more inner peace doing more of that community and stuff on the local level because it may not be possible kind of above the local level. And so you essentially have, I think everyone really has two choices when it comes to how to do healthy spirituality. Either you're going to be a part of a religious or spiritual tradition and you're going to have to deconstruct a lot of the bullshit to get to like a place that's really healthy, or from the secular side you're going to have to do a lot of building up from scratch, like a lot more than people realize in order to get all those benefits. But the difference between like the most deconstructed Christian and the most spiritual atheist is not a huge, I don't think that's a huge difference. And really, I think that's the healthy place that I think everyone should be moving towards because it avoids the extreme problems of fundamentalism and nihilism. And so for me now, it's more about how can I critique religion so that it continues to deconstruct and hopefully get healthier? How do we build up more tools on the secular side so that everybody can be in that, nice gooey space in between the extremes
Mm.
of fundamentalism and nihilism, which is where we see the most harm.
That's literally like what I've been wanting, and I get some people have to believe at the end of the day, and I'm like, I'm not trying to take away that. Like, it's just the radical kind of, extreme stuff that comes out of this harmful parts of the religion. I want to ask you one question. We got a few super chats I want to ask too, so I don't leave people hanging who are helping support the channel along the way. They have questions for you. They're clearly aware of your work and they love what you do. But my question to you would be this, and I wonder, each of us might answer this differently, and I kind of have a feeling I know where you're at and why you're doing this, but if you had a choice you had a choice between religion ultimately is more delusional, let's just say, in terms of reality, okay? We're psyching ourselves out and playing make believe, all right? Or and society works, it functions. Humans have meaning and purpose. They can deal with death, they can deal with all the things. And let's just say we found the math, right? We knew the data. And they came back. There was no like, well, in this country, we took a poll, like the whole earth, we were able to know that religion had a better overall statistic. If you're religious and you self-delude, you become like Ayan Hirsi Ali. You just split your brain and say, okay, boom, society in the world operated better. Or religion's not true, and we recognize that overall humanity's health and whatnot actually starts to deteriorate and go down a worse path. So you have like two ethical problems here in your mind.
Mhm.
Which ethical
Yeah.
solution would you choose?
Yeah, this is a great trolley problem, and I think about variations of this trolley problem probably every day because I deeply consider the ethics of what I'm doing and even talking about deconstructing to nihilism because there are people who end their lives on that path. And so I'm very concerned with the ethics of what I'm doing. And it was interesting that Alex O'Connor just asked Sam Harris this question, this exact same question. What do you do if we realize that humanity really can't survive nihilism and that the collective well-being of the world is going to be significantly worse if people don't have the stories that make them feel like life is worth living or the morality that they feel like is grounded or whatever it is? And it was interesting that Sam Harris said that if we could know that that humanity needs these stories in order for it to function, well-being has to matter more than truth. And if we knew that, I would take the books off my shelf and I would, you know, either not critique religion or be a part of religion or whatever he said. And I ask atheists this question sometimes because there comes a point in your deconstruction where sometimes, especially when you get into really dark corners of philosophy, where you have to choose what's more important to you, truth or well-being. Because we have some even data that shows that the more you go into philosophy, the more depressed you get. Like
Interesting.
there's an inverse relationship to happiness, the deeper that you go down some of these rabbit holes. And so the question, yeah. So as far as me, if I could know that if you're asking me to rank well-being or truth for the whole world for that question, I think well-being has to matter more than truth because you get to this weird place. This is a really rabbit hole place where you may leave religion because you feel like it's not true, and then you get to spaces in nihilism where you can't even trust your own rationality, and you don't even know what's true, and you end up just making up some subjective truth to live by anyway. And then you realize, like, wait, isn't that just what religion is doing too?
Right.
And so
Right.
sometimes you circle back to that place, like if you keep deconstructing. So it pains me because truth is such a high core value for me, but I think ethically well-being has to matter more than truth. And so there are times where I think it's the ethical thing to do to not take someone's, like if I could know that pushing someone towards nihilism or the void would cause them to become an alcoholic and end their life, like I would not push their religion if I knew that it would end up that way. So I do think that well-being has to matter, but I do think that I see individuals. The place that I know where we can do work is I know individuals can create lives of morality and meaning and love and even spirituality and thriving, even in the face of nihilism, even without knowing what's true. And so that I think is possible. Now, whether society can handle that as a whole and what a we've had secular societies. We've never had a society that's truly nihilistic, like a nihilistic society, to know what it would do. I'm skeptical that the whole world could handle living life without comfortable stories that make it okay. I'm skeptical that we could pull that off, but individuals I think can. And so I help the individuals.
Yeah, that's been one of the things I do as I go along, and I say, I'm like, hey, if you need this, get it. You know what I mean? Like, I would prefer you to take the less harmful path either direction on an individual
Yeah, we're
basis.
still gonna call out harm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you. I agree with you. I just figured I'd play a little game with that question because it's super super general. I mean, that makes us forget like the individuals and their communities and their small communities, and then not everyone has
Mm.
to be the same, you know. But I just figured
It's
I'd throw
such
that
a good
number.
question though of like whether like why is truth good? Because there's atheists like John Gray that talk about even the idea that truth is good is something that we get from Christianity. Because like we actually have some evidence that shows that a certain amount of truth is actually maladaptive to you thriving as far
Mm,
as like how much do you want to live this life with eyes wide open without stories that kind of soften the blow of the amount of suffering going on and even just facing death and terror management theory and how much our brain compartmentalizes death and things like that. So like you get to these spaces where at the beginning you're like truth is good, I'm leaving the church because it's not true, and then you start to have to justify, well, wait, why is truth good? Because there comes some spaces where there's certain branches of philosophy, like where they will have warning signs in the book saying, like, this is not going to make you happier. Like, and step away if you need to. Like,
mm.
and I think we have to be as atheists honest about well-being. I think has to matter more than truth, which may change how we interact with religion.
Yeah. Golly, there's so much to unravel. Okay, I'm gonna get some super chats, and then you and me can
Yeah,
finish
yeah.
it
Hit me some
up.
questions.
DJ Wilkins in the house. Thank you so much, DJ. DJ is going to be giving his deconversion story as well at some point here in the near future. If you can call an experience magical without believing in magic, then why can't you call yourself spiritual without believing in spirits?
Yeah, I mean that's fair. So people ask me sometimes like why am I even entertaining the word spirituality when it has that spirit word, and I don't know that we don't have a soul, but I don't believe in a soul or spirits. And part of that is like there's a language issue here. And so this is a question that I could pose to you. I love talking to people about this question because I'm not sure I'm right about my approach in this. But what do we do in the secular world? Do we try to reclaim these words that have religious baggage or baggage to it, in order that religion not have a monopoly on these experiences? Or are these words so damaged and mean what we don't want them to mean that we have to try to create new words? Because right now we really don't have a word in secularism that means everything that I can put under the umbrella of spirituality. You know, like all of the awe and the wisdom and the community and the ritual, and there's so much that I can pack in under the word spirituality. I don't have a word in secularism. And so, do we reclaim some of these monopolies that, you know, because there's sometimes that people will have, for example, there's data that shows that 2/3 of atheists who do like a large mushroom trip will, they don't go back to religion, but they won't call themselves an atheist after.
Yeah.
And some of them feel like religion is the only place that is talking about these really transcendent experiences that are peak experiences. And so, is secularism doing a disservice by not using these words, because then people only feel like they can talk about it in religion? Or are these words so baggaged that we need to be developing different language, which then is its own problem? What do you feel about that?
I actually agree with you, and I'm just another angle in my mind approached why. Because if we do try to then recreate a definition or come up with new terms to describe these things, I think even on a human level, we create more of a disconnect and divide between us and the religious folks. And there seems to be
Mm,
much more division today in our minds between politics, religion, you name it. Like there's so much divide. We're forgetting how human each other are. And I think if we share a common language, but define what we mean by it, we
mm.
become closer. It makes us closer
I
either way.
totally agree.
You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
I
So
totally agree. Because I think one of the reasons that religious people can dismiss atheists is because they assume that I've never had a spiritual experience,
yeah,
right? They just
yeah,
assume like I'm attacking their sense of the sacred. And it's like, no, like I experience what I would call the sacred. I have had spiritual experiences in religion. I have now even
same.
more outside of religion. I'm not trying to attack your sense of the sacred. I just don't agree with the framework that you've put around it, especially in the ways that it causes harm. So I totally agree with you, but I get a lot of pushback from atheists for using that term.
Of
And
course.
I can understand why. Like, it's a problematic word, but like, given my options, it seems like the best one. So that's
I have the
validating
same.
to hear.
Yeah, and I have problems when we talk about God. People will go, "Do you believe in a God?" And I go, "Well, the whole definition to me is human. As far back as we can go, humans have constructed these ideas, these concepts, making natural sources into divinities and such. I see the evolution like you do, the anthropology and stuff. So the word God has so much baggage, and I complain about it. But then I understand what they ultimately mean, and it's like they think, well, something has all this going, right? And they don't really take the naturalist approach that, you have infinite regress or like some other explanation you're trying to explain, and you try to do it from a natural worldview where you're like, I don't believe there's some divinity behind it. Maybe things are infinite, maybe multiverse, maybe this, maybe that. But even then, if I mean, like, why can't we just then go, well, that's God then? The universe itself
Yeah.
and all existence is God at
Yeah.
this point. We'll speak the same language. We have a different definition. But like, you can't escape, I think, the tidal wave it feels of pressure that history has had, and you almost
Yeah.
want to use the language, but you don't. And I feel the
Yeah.
struggle. I
I
know
feel
what you
like
mean.
I took like a full year where like my focus of the year was like, what do I do about the God word? Because in spiritual direction, which is my job, and after my master's degree in theology, I did a 2-year program in in non-religious spiritual direction. I talk to people about God every day. Like, I talk, like, the word God leaves my mouth or I'm in conversation about God every single day. And Christians will be like, oh, it's because God is real. And it's like, well, okay, whatever. And I really had to think, how do I ethically approach this word? Because like you, like, it for a while, it made me really uncomfortable. I wanted to be really sure about how I was ethically using this word, because I also didn't want to like gaslight people and use this word in ways that was like not representative of me. So how do I balance that? And the analogy that really helped me out here was differentiating between truth claims and emotions. So when someone walks into a cathedral, which whenever I travel, I always go to wherever the churches are, even now, and someone walks into a cathedral and says, I feel God here, they're using a mouth sound, God, to describe an experience that they're having.
Yep.
And I have no problem, as a full on, very spicy on social media atheist, saying, I feel God here too. I have no problem with that, because all we're doing at root level is someone is feeling something and they're
Right.
using this mouth sound to describe it. And I have no problem meeting that feeling. Now, if you want to say God is this and hates gay people and, whatever the truth claims, okay, now we've left experience and emotion. And now you're talking about truth claims about ultimate reality. And that's going to be a different tool set. That's when we need to be skeptical. That's when I need to say, what is your evidence? Because now
Right.
you're making like even just scientific truth claims about the nature of reality. And so
Yeah.
separating that, what are you meaning by God? Are we talking truth claim space where I'm going to put on my skeptical hat? Or are you talking about an experience that I also have had too? That's allowed me to navigate that word a little bit better.
Yeah, or even a song hits, you have something deep, and it's a completely secular song, okay? But
Mm.
it's a love song between you and your partner or your children, or, your love for your family, whatever, and you're like, "Oh, that hits. That's so deep. The experience is so good." And they're like, "Yeah, that same experience I had when I was worshiping in church, okay, I have with secular music today." And I try to tell people, like, I have those same warm fuzzies, but I also have another dimension to me where I had addiction issues with opiates,
Mm.
and I
Mm.
had profound warmth from, when you do get that opiate hit, it hits the receptors. It does all the work to making you think God's hugging you at that moment. And
Mm.
so I was able to get a whole different arena of experience in that. Um, our next super chat is Chris Wood. Thank you so much, Chris, for the super chat. Great to see you on Myth Vision. I missed your first live stream. I'm a deconstructed Christian, but I'm not an atheist. Is your book for me? I want to reconstruct, but feel like I can't trust anyone.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great place to be when you feel like I just can't trust someone else telling me what they've, are claiming is capital T true. So my book is not proving that you should be an atheist. It's not proving, it's not like one of those Richard Dawkins books where it's like God is a delusion. Like it's not one of those books. It's a book that says, here are the tools of religion and spirituality. Here's the science behind it. What are ways that you can authentically bring that into your life? And that can include, like, if you're a deist or you're a panpsychist or you're a stoicist or you're a Buddhist, like whatever ism that you ascribe to right now in your journey, these two, you can still find ways to authentically bring these tools into your life. So my book is not trying to convince you that you should be a nihilist or an atheist. I spend almost no time arguing that all the reasons why there isn't a God. I'm just honest about my experience, that I got to a place where I am so allergic to truth claims after so many years in theology school and building so many theologies in my lifetime, that I just want to show, hey, here's a path that seems to have some tools that don't require any truth claims at all. And that's different than me saying, here's the path for you of the truth, and the truth is, nihilism, and you should be like me. It's like, no, I don't know what is ultimate reality. I don't trust anyone's truth claims either. But here are some tools that you can integrate without being required to believe things. So I do think it's that it would be appropriate for you on your journey right now.
I would like if you could remind me to get into nihilism a little bit more, because I think that's going to be important, because it seems like you not only deconverted from Christianity, but you also went into deconverting from something that is dark. And I think it's important we understand that, what if reality is really that dark and we just need to play make believe somehow to not go too far? So remind me to come back to that if you can. I
Yeah.
would like to hear what you've learned, because I have not studied it in depth at all. Solera Knight again says, Christmas is not mentioned or even celebrated anywhere in the Bible, anywhere. So why Christmas the cornerstone of modern Christianity?
Yeah, every year, me and Dan McClellan and other people who are kind of in that space, every year at Christmas time, we make the same video, and we all do. You probably see them, where people will talk about how Christmas is actually really pagan because of XYZ, and we don't really have a lot of evidence of that. Really what we're seeing is aspects of Christmas, especially in Western Europe, especially in Germany in the 1600s, and then Christmas trees come to Queen Elizabeth in England, and so it tends to be much more in our recent history rather than something that is pagan that continues on today. So it has a long story, and it's one of those things where it has 10,000 elements of what Christmas is, and each one has its own history. But most of that we can trace really back to medieval Christianity, versus that we can find this line of Christmas going all the way to paganism, and then even before Christmas. That tends to be like, I'm not against you doing pagan Christmas. Like, if that's the way that you want to do Christmas, that's fantastic. But I wouldn't say that that's like the true Christmas, which sometimes you get that message around Christmas time from people who are more in the pagan space, and there's just not a lot of evidence for that. So it's I don't know how much you want to go through that, but that's like a 30-minute video on like all of the elements of Christmas and where they come from.
Yeah, I've got a buddy who does a lot of reactions to a lot of this, because there's the calculation hypothesis, where they think that Christians calculate it, but then Sol Invictus is roughly around the same time, and there's this really tug of war on what seems to be happening. And at the end of the day, there's, even to this day, there's still debates between the history of religion school and like a lot of these scholars who are trying to like say, well, no, calculation explains it all. And I think that this is not the platform or the day to really get into all those weeds,
Yeah.
but I would recommend
It's fun.
Yeah.
Like definitely listen to someone who does like the full 2 hour on like, here's the debates around the date. Here's the Christmas tree and where it came from. Here's
Right.
the various elements of Santa Claus and the various countries that it comes from. Here's where the commercialization happens. Like, there's just so many elements that it's like what God is. It's like thousands of years of humans doing stuff. And I just like,
Yeah.
I can't put that in a sentence for you, but definitely listen to a longer podcast on that from someone who is a better Bible scholar than me.
Absolutely. The Deadly Dan 42 months says we evolved with culture, not religion. What are your thoughts on that?
We've been doing religion for at least tens of thousands of years. We see elements of religion. So for at least tens of thousands of years, we've been doing religion. If we let's say that we've been human in this form for about 300,000 years, and we can get up to almost between 80 and 100,000 years that we see elements of religion. So, and we don't know kind of before then aspects of religiosity, but really the root of this, when people ask what is the root of religion, rather than it just being this modern construct, what's the real root of this as far as our evolution? It's this concept called hyperactive agency detection, HAAD, which is that evolution rewarded us for being superstitious. And where I argue with atheists is that atheists will say all religion is just indoctrination, that if we just got rid of these books, then we would just be this perfectly functioning secular society. And we may be born atheist in the sense that we usually take on the religion in our parents, but we are also born superstitious. Evolution rewarded us for superstition. And we see elements of that as far as we have records for humans, that we are superstitious by nature, by evolution. That is a accepted scientific theory. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not just me spouting some kind of theological bullshit. That the root of it, as far as we can tell, is that if you could imagine that the rustling of the bushes is a lion and run, that false positive or whatever it was, you survived, and the one who didn't use their imagination in that way and assume agency to agents outside of them was more likely to die. And so we are the descendants of the superstitious, anxious, over applying agency to everything around us kind of people. That is our ancestors. That is what we are in human nature. And so I truly believe, even as an atheist, that if you removed religion today and you got everyone in this generation who's alive today to be secular and outgrow religion and superstition and all of that, the next generation would fall back into superstition, because that is what we are in human nature. And so this idea that religion is just indoctrination, or it's just recent, or we're cultural, not religious, I don't think that view lends to the science and data that we have that shows that we are, for as long as we have records of humans, superstitious by nature, because evolution rewarded that. And it's something we actually have to override, which is a very difficult project for atheists to take on, that we have to actually override something that seems to be really deep into our human nature.
Oh gosh, this is good. Have you read Michael Shermer's book, The Believing Brain?
I've listened to podcasts about it,
Yeah,
but not sat down and read the whole thing. Yeah.
Okay, it's on Audible. That one right there, it covers the whole why our brains are wired to be superstitious, and how it was our adaptation to being superstitious was advantageous for our survival, and all the things you just described. And then he goes into other animals, from birds to mammals, how they've done tests to show the reward system that comes with believing in pattern recognition, and you talked about agency, assuming agency. All of that plays into why we believe. And so when I hear people say we were born atheists, I think to myself, there's actually, I just have to say, I personally disagree. I just don't agree. I know a lot of really popular atheists who would say, no, we're born atheists.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you're born not with the name of a particular anything. And of course, we're molded to believe what our parents are passing on to us, of course. But I think we're already superstitious, manufactured from the gate, superstitious and wired that way. And there's a book by a guy named John Wathy, if you haven't checked him out, that talks about the phantom God. And he has another one, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. He has 2 books. I've interviewed him on this, where he talks about, he believes that gods came from our mother and father. Neurologically, we're wired in the womb, And there's even facial recognition systems that go on in the brain where we're like already genetically being wired inside of the mother's womb, and we're experiencing her presence. We can hear her, we can hear him, we can feel
Hmm.
these things. And when we come out of the womb as sponges, little sponges, we have no agency of our own that we can take care of ourselves. So we cry out, and mother reward system gives milk, right? And we're constantly fed
Mm.
and dependent upon agents that they aren't us.
Mm.
So
Hmm.
that wiring of depending upon an agent that isn't you is so wired in us as infants that as we get older, we're still thinking mother or father, even though
Mm.
mother or father are not there, which explains why there are deities of goddesses and gods in antiquity, which represent fathers and mothers and all these things. And so he was explaining that and then using the phantom limb as an
Mm.
example to point out that when your arm is cut off, years later, that person knows consciously that their arm is gone, but someone tosses a football
Yeah.
at them, they'll reach with the missing arm. And how our
Mm.
brains will wire and connect to fake limbs that aren't really there by doing that
Mm.
whole put the arm behind the thing and then put the fake arm in front, and they touch both, connecting them, and then you take a hammer and hit the fake arm and you feel it. So you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like there's like so
Yeah,
much
I'm not
there.
I'm not as familiar with that particular theory, but it wraps on to kind of a sister theory that I know of where like why do Christians have such a hard time with giving any blame to God? Like they give all the good things to God but never blame God. And when we have some pretty good research showing that when we dig into that psychologically, it's the same thing with kids when their parents divorce and they feel like it's their fault.
Yeah.
It's actually more unsafe to feel like there's something wrong with the person that you're dependent on. That's psychologically very unsafe, that we just assume that then it's our fault. Because
Mm.
if it's our fault, there's something as a kid that I can do that can make my life better. But if my parents are terrible and they're abusive and they're divorcing or whatever, and I'm dependent on them, that's so psychologically unsafe for our dependent nature as children that we tend to not want to do that with our parents. And you'll hear children really try to uh like vouch for their parents and give them the benefit of the doubt and really not try to put a lot of blame on them because it's so psychologically harmful to blame the thing that you're dependent on. And that's pretty easily transferred to God, that psychologically it's very unsafe to say that maybe God is an asshole sometimes, because if we're dependent on God, then that's very scary. And so it's much easier to say everything is good is God, everything good in this world is God, and when it's wrong, it's us. It's exactly what children do with their parents when they're divorcing, and we're seeing that same behavior, with God and children. So yeah, there's just like when you really get into the cognitive science of religion and what religion is doing psychologically, individually, and also communally, it's doing a lot more than just I think this story is historically true. It's doing more than I think all of us really realized.
Yeah, that's why my job in the past has been so hard, because I think, oh, I'll just
Mm,
show them the evidence. They'll just look at the text and they'll see it, right?
yeah.
Wrong. It isn't just look at the data. They have so much other protection in their mind that the experience, their life, their identity, everything is wrapped up so much in it that you can't be right. This can't mean
Mm,
what you're saying it
yeah.
means.
And if
And
you debate people long enough, they'll tell you what they're afraid of. Like if you debate someone long enough, they'll say, I watched this with an Alex O'Connor debate when he debated the 20 Christians or whatever it was, where someone said, like, if you believe as you do, I think it was actually the Mormon, Jacob Hansen, if you believe as you do, how do you not just like kill yourself because everything is meaningless? Or why don't you just go around raping everyone? Like
yeah,
eventually they'll get to the argument that says you can't be right because I can't accept this as true emotionally. This is too difficult. And so like when I debate people, like you think that you're just debating facts. Nobody's debating facts. Nobody's changing their mind in these debates. You're debating these ideas that you're wrapped your identity around. And all it is two primates who can speak saying, my identity deserves to exist. My way of life and identity deserves to exist. And we're going to throw arguments at each other that we're not even like clocking or really thinking about. And we call it a debate. and nobody's changing their mind, because none of this is rational. This is much deeper than just rationality. This is much deeper than just historical truth claims. This is the stories that keep especially our existential fears at bay. And if you debate someone long enough, they'll tell you what that existential fear is. Like, it shows up of like, that can't be true because then this, and that's scary. And that's the place where I really meet people, is when they no longer can believe and they dive into that fear.
Wow. Next super chat, DJ Wilkins is back. Thank you, DJ. Britt's voice and work are so important. So much deconstructing going on. Thank you, Britt, for focusing on reconstruction too. Great to see you on Myth Vision.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. And I think it's interesting that you said thank you for focusing on reconstruction too, because my one critique for the deconstruction space, and some of this I feel like we get from our time in religion and thinking that we're better than everyone when we're in religion, and thinking we're better than everyone when you're outside religion, is it's such like an addictive high horse when you get to tell people how stupid they are and how stupid their beliefs are and how wrong they are. And all of those videos, even when I do religious deconstruction videos, those videos do really well. There's almost like an addictive self-righteousness to it. Reconstruction is the hard work. And those videos don't do as well, because it's not, you don't get that addictive feeling of like, I'm right and you're wrong and you're stupid, which is a lot of what religious deconstruction space is. And I think we need to do a little bit less of that high horse deconstruction stuff, even though like I definitely had my period in it. I feel like we need to outgrow some of that and talk more seriously about stuff that doesn't feel as good, which is the reconstruction stuff.
I think the analogy I'd give to like, it's just a basic one, but it might make sense, is that people who are driving down the road in a 45 mile per hour, you could tell them from the United States, 45 mile per hour road, and they see, let's say, a community group thing going on the side of the road. They're trying to do some, donate to our cause. We have a cheerleading thing, whatever, right? You stay driving 45 miles an hour, unless you're going to pull in to give a donation, but you're not like overly like, turning your head. But when you see sirens and lights and cones and a car upside down and fire and smoke, people slow down. It does not matter. They're down to 5 miles an hour. You're honking, going, let's go, let's go. But people turn their heads because they want to see, they're more interested in what's wrong, what's bad, what's, and not so much.
We are controversy whores in that way. And then when you get to like real discussions in deconstruction spaces about, okay, how do we do moral education for kids? How do we create we know that kids really need identity and belonging in those early stages in order to have the stability to move on to some of the later stages of human development. How do we do that in the secular world for children? Those are hard conversations. Those aren't fun conversations. You don't get to sit there and feel better than everyone else in those conversations. And because it's lacking that controversial, self-righteous, whatever kind of content, those videos, like they don't do very well even when we are talking about it. So I appreciate that you see that I'm trying to do reconstruction stuff too.
Absolutely. Pick and choose. Thank you for the super chat. I'm a I think they mean Catholic, wrestling with deacon. Religion too tiny for huge timeless creator. I often wonder what human spirituality was 200K years ago, etc.
Yeah, I'm an atheist, but I'm not necessarily an adeist. If you want to say that the way that we see the universe really requires a creator, I can't prove that wrong. The only thing that I will kind of debate against is a lot of people will be in that kind of creator ground of being. Pete Holmes, the comedian, talks about this kind of God. Rainn Wilson talks about this kind of God, this more deist kind of God. Like, I don't have a lot of strong arguments because I don't know the nature of reality to say that you're definitely wrong. Where I think that people start smuggling in things, metaphysical things unfairly, is when you say that creator is good, because the level of animal suffering and for millions of years, animals just eat each other alive just so that some humans can experience, going to the theater and having a nice time. I have a really hard time with than saying that their creator is good. That's where I would argue. But if you want to argue that there's a timeless creator, we don't have a lot of strong evidence against deism arguments, because we just know too little about the origins of life and the nature of the universe. I'm just going to argue with you if you call that good, because I think that's smuggling in a lot. And yeah, I'm really curious about what spirituality was 200,000 years ago, especially in the context of matriarchy. I would love to be able to hop back and see what they were doing and see what they were up to. And I'd also like to look, if we survive the future, I'd also like to look to see what religion is like in the future. That's actually, it's something that I've cried about. It's something that I've mourned, is that it's really hard for me as a history person, as a story person, and a words person, and I really love like seeking truth and knowing what's going on, knowing that I don't know how life began really, and I'll probably die not knowing. And I won't know how humans end, like how this collective story that I'm a part of ends. That's very sad for me. Like I deeply mourn that. That's hard for me.
Have you read the book A Short Life, or A Short History of Life on Earth?
I don't think so. No. Mm-mm.
It's, you know how you read Sapien. It's kind of in the vein of Sapien, but it's much more focused on evolution. Of course, he doesn't go into the elaborate details of what the hypotheses of abiogenesis, but like how life starts in the ocean and works its way, and then he gets to this extinction section, and he's like, unless we leave this planet at some point and find a way to traverse, and make existence possible elsewhere, we will all go extinct. It is inevitable. And like, he's just going through the science of it. I'm like, oh crap. Like, no matter what you do, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, ugh.
And none of that used to bother me more, especially when I was more fresh out of religion. But I can honestly say that even if religion wins, even if this planet blows up and nobody ever knows that we were here, like even if I could know that, and you put me on a time machine and I see how this story ends, and no one in the universe ever knows that we were here, even if that were true, like my way of life can withstand that level of reality. Like I still can say that I got to pop my head out in the universe and experience existence. I created a life that was worth experiencing at the level of experience, and I will let it go when my time is over. And I'm still glad that I got to exist, and I'll be probably glad when it's done too. And so like my way of life isn't a story that makes that sad reality untrue. It's that I have built in tools from philosophy and religion and spirituality and anywhere that I can find tools to create a life that's worth living, even if that were true. And that's where I've finally found real emotional stability, because I don't have to defend any truths. I don't have my identity around any truths that have to be true. And so I'm just free to explore what is, and what is consciousness, and what is all these things, because you can still create a life that is worth experiencing, even if all of this is in an ultimate way meaningless.
It's kind of interesting. If before we move to the next question, if I may press further, because this gets into the whole nihilism issue. Maybe you could take a moment to tell us the darkness of some of the things you've learned about this, right? In adding to the idea that you have some positive feedback, okay, to try and say, listen, because look, it feels like when I've engaged a lot of religious people who talk about, well, if you don't have objective moral values that are grounded in a God, it's almost like we're taught in these religions that the story, the truths, the ethics, the morals, the whatever, have to be larger than us. They have to be, for them to even matter. It's almost like, pretend there was no God. Suppose humans evolved and I have a God, but we thought there was life and there were aliens on other planets. Some believe that. They're the ones who are taking account from a distance. They know what we're up to, just like Santa Claus, knowing whether you're naughty or nice. That important narrative is what they have to give them significance. And if you take away that narrative, that the aliens on planet Xenu, on a whole nother, ball of rock in the universe, then they themselves in this moment right now have no morals, have no, truth, have no meaning. It's like you've taken away their meaning if you've taken away that thing way out there. And it feels like you and me have realized the thing way out there we're no longer convinced of. We aren't living, holding our breath, thinking that thing exists. Yet we're ethical. We have purpose. We have meaning. You went through a phase where you started to really see, I guess, a very dark way of viewing the world through a philosophy of nihilism. Can you explain what that was, and then maybe, I don't know, tie this back in?
Yeah. Let's see where I want to go with that. First, I want to say, like, what's the reason why we want to ground? Like Christian apologists like they're trying so hard all day, every day to ground morality. And so it's like, well, why are we trying so hard to do that? And what we're finding is that uh, our brains do very poorly in high amounts of chaos. And if you just accept that we're on this planet, we don't know how life began, we don't know how our story ends, there's no universal sense of morality. We just seem to be social primates that have moral intuitions. And those are somewhat arbitrary, but have helped our survival. And even we can't even trust our rationality, because at the beginning of deconstruction, you're like, yeah, I'm a secular person, I trust science and rationality. And then if you keep deconstructing, if rationality is just a tool that evolution kind of gave us, and I'm using these terms liberally, I know evolution doesn't have will like that, but gave us in order to survive, then what grounds do you have to even trust your rationality when you're saying this religion is true or not true or whatever? You can't even trust your rationality. So you have moral intuitions that are arbitrary. You're going to die. You have no idea what the hell is going on. You don't know how to live a life or what a good life would be for you. You can't trust your rationality. There's no meaning or purpose, no ultimate sense of meaning or purpose. Nobody, like you're alone in the sense that nobody knows what it's like to be you, and no God is watching you. And when you really go down, and you can go further down into that, but I try sometimes ethically not to. Like this is where you get, like, the darkest part of these roads is when you get to this idea that it's moral to not only end your life but take as many people with you. That's the end
Yeah.
of some of the thought patterns of this road. We just had a guy in the past year, and the FBI made this new category of nihilistic violence because a guy live streamed on YouTube trying to blow up a fertility clinic because he truly believed, after going down some of these philosophical trails, mostly online, in ways that were unhealthy, that it was the most moral thing to do, to take himself out and to take as many eggs who were destined to suffer in life as he could with him.
Hmm.
And like it can start going that direction. And so what I want to do here is, with nihilism, is say, even if some of these things are true in the sense that we can't ground morality, we can't ground rationality, we can't ground objective truth. That's another one. We can't ground, we don't know why we're here, we don't know what happens after we die. You kind of have two options there. Your options are to pick or three options. You kind of have the option to pick a story that soothes those fears, which religion soothes all of those fears. It's one of the real reasons why we co-evolved with it. Or you go into dark places and you have numbing behaviors or slow suicide or suicide. And some of these writers, like when we talk about Philip Mainlander, who wrote a pretty dark philosophical book, and then the day that it released, he ended his life. Like he believed it to the end. So there's a path that I see. And there's also a path that I see that can be hard, but I think is really meaningful, where you say, what would it be like to build a life in light of these harsh truths of reality and grow strong enough to meet them?
Hmm.
That means that I have to face death and really deeply accept in my bones that I'm going to die. And there's going to be a day that my kids want to call me and talk to me, and I won't be there. Like I mourn that. I cried about that. I had to work with that fear. We have 4 existential fears: death, meaninglessness, isolation, and fear of freedom. And so if you can actually know what those existential fears are and work with them directly, it's kind of like exposure therapy, where if you're afraid of spiders, you're going to adjust your life so that you're never around any spiders. But if you went to a therapist and did exposure therapy, the therapist would allow you to get closer to the spider and lowered your kind of nervous system response so that eventually you could sit and be okay next to the spider. And so I survived nihilism not because I escaped it, but because I have a healthier, conscious, integrated relationship with death and meaninglessness and chaos and accepting that things are going to go wrong in my life and I don't have control. And that is like, that was a lot of mini deaths. Like I died a lot of times in that process.
Yeah.
But on the other side of that, I do think there is hope that when you grow to meet that and you grow to accept that you'll die and there is meaninglessness and you don't have control and you can't do these little superstitious rituals in order to do some kind of prosperity gospel so you'll be okay. You just accept that it may not be, that you can actually grow to live a life even in the void, even in the face of those harsh truths. Do I think it's a way of life for everyone? No. Like there were times where I almost didn't make it. Like it's a very hard psychologically thing to do. Like our brains don't want to look at these things. Like our brains subconsciously hide us from all of this because it's really hard to just be a human knowing you don't know what the hell is going on and you're going to die and you have no control and you don't know anything and you can't trust anything. Like it's hard. Like I'm living a life without most of the anchors that people have. But there's an honesty and a stability when you grow to meet that has been very rewarding for me. And there's a lot of benefits to this way of life too. It's very freeing. You're not surprised by death. It can become it's like making an eye in the storm almost. That when you get close, when you accept that level of chaos and instability and become okay with it, it's like you find stability in the instability. But it's very difficult for brains to do, which is why we co-evolved with religion to do all this work for us.
Wow. I don't know.
What do you want to do with that?
Yeah, I don't know if I want to read any nihilistic philosophy, man. I almost want to avoid it now. I mean, you got me kind of freaked out about it a little. We'll just keep going to the next super chat, and I'm sure there's something else that comes to mind. Britt, have you considered the Oasis Network, a non-faith secular community lasting 11 years so far?
Yeah, I'm speaking at one in July in Salt Lake when I go down for the Sunstone Conference, which is kind of an ex-Mormon conference. So I'm speaking with Oasis. I have many friends who are in that network. I'm also really close to the people in Thrive who are doing kind of a similar thing. I speak at my local UU. All of these are similar things, which is like we're trying to do the good stuff of what community and religion can be. Without requiring people to believe certain things. And I appreciate what all these groups are trying to do, but we can obviously see that there's some shortcomings. And when I ask these people and I ask every community, like especially adults will say like, well, I have all that because I go to my local UU and we have all that. And I ask, okay, where are the children? Because there are like even the children of the pastors at UU are not attending UU. There's no group of children that are finding their identity and belonging and moral education and life and purpose and meaning in the Oasis Network or Thrive or UU or some of these other similar organizations. So I'm not against what they're doing. I speak at a lot of these things. I'm friends with a lot of people who are trying to do these projects in various ways. I just think that we have to accept that we're always going to hit up against this problem, which is if you're not dogmatic, you're not going to get the kind of money and power that Catholicism and Mormonism has in the world. And that's going to be its own set of problems. And it's also not really hitting the kids. It's not really helping the kids. And when we're looking at the anxiety and depression of Gen Z, I think they are the ones that are paying the true cost for their parents deconstructing from religion. Some of those things are good. Like there's a lot of religious trauma that my kids are not going to get because they're not raised in the Mormon religion. But there are also some downsides that maybe their Mormon, friends are getting as far as that identity and belonging and some of that psychological stability and having adults teaching them moral education, being a part of a community. These organizations are really not able to get the kids. And it's the problem that everybody's trying to figure out. So I'm not against it. I just think that there's some weaknesses.
Oh, so much. Thank you. Ricky Johnson says, Britt's description of sandcastles of meaning On Rain's podcast really resonated with me, perfectly articulated how I live my life. Been a fan since your appearance on the Mormon Stories pod, Britt.
Thank you. Thank you, Ricky. So just briefly, that sandcastles of meaning, it was a big shift for me when I was really struggling with my nihilism, because I had this feeling that if all we do is just build sandcastles and the wave washes them away with death and time, what is the point of any of this? And I had this really big shift, which seems intuitive now and seems obvious now, but it just wasn't obvious to me then, because I was built on, my brain was still very religious because I was looking for truth first and a way of life second. But if you flip that on its head and you look at children, children don't build sandcastles because they're going to last forever and there's ultimate meaning. Children build sandcastles because they're enjoying it at the level of experience. Just the challenge of, how do I build a moat, and wouldn't it be fun if, and what can I find? How can I put a shell on top and decorate it and whatever? And they're in the experience of it. And the value of the sandcastle is not ultimate meaning. Is not that the universe cares that the sandcastle is there. It's that there's something special about experiencing anything at all and being on a beach and building a sandcastle with a little moat. And that was a big shift for me. And it helped me to build on this other foundation, which is, instead of truth claims or instead of metaphysical realities about the universe, what is inherently meaningful at the level of experience? Because that's probably the only thing that we know. The only thing that I can know for sure, I don't even know, like there's a philosophy called solipsism where I can't even know if you're conscious. I can only know that I am. Like, we really don't know anything. But if there's one thing that we could say that we could know, it would be that there seems to be an experiential quality to reality. And that's true if we're on an alien computer, or if panpsychism is true, or whatever is true. It seems to be that there's a quality to experience, that it is something to be like me. It is something, there's a difference in experience between hugging my child and touching a hot stove. And so we can build from that. Maybe that's the only thing that we know, that we're experiencing creatures. And so what is inherently true for me at the level of experience? This conversation for me is very much not because, like, it's not because like I'm trying to get to some goal or some monetary goal or some career goal. It's because like what I'm doing right now, you and me, is like being little children and playing. Like, this is play for me, right? Like this, we're building a sandcastle just for the hell of it because we're just enjoying the conversation so much.
Exactly.
And so when I started to build my life from that ground, I found some ground that I could build on, even if I don't know what's ultimately true about the universe. But that was a shift for me.
Yeah, that's important for the whole nihilism, like you said, or even just a lot of people, I think, take for granted of the experience right now, like you're saying. And I think that's more important. And it's difficult to get people who've been trained or to believe you have to have it grounded in something in order for it to have any meaning in the right now. And that's part of why I think I'm clean from opiates. I mean, I was injecting heroin at the end, and I was addicted to alcohol, all sorts of stuff. And I always describe it as like I found myself. And it is a very traumatic, very difficult to explain experience for myself. But it was like I journeyed these hills of suffering and trial and religious studying and all this. And I get to this mountain and there's a mirror. And I get closer and I see God, but it was like, it was you all along. And in all these flashbacks of like the footprints in the sand, and it was like, that was me that carried you, Jesus said. And I realized back, it's like, actually, it was you all along who walked yourself through those trials, through the struggles. And when you couldn't walk, it was your mom, it was your wife, it was your kids, it was and like, so it was like my religion became me and my experiences, so to speak. And I found that loving myself, being okay with being human, being okay with having shortcomings, not hating my flesh, and finding, all the religious theology. And that was what, for me, did it. And I feel like I'm like, okay, it was gradual, but like 10 years now.
And and we do know that like transcendent experiences like that are like very positive for being able to overcome addiction. Because it's almost like you get out of yourself for a little bit and can look down. And I love what you said about discovering that it was you the whole way, because it's like at the beginning, it's like, oh, God wasn't there. Who was I talking to this whole time? And then you have this realization that all those times I was wrestling with something and had a question about something, and then would have a dream about it, or would have a thought that popped in my brain that felt like revelation. Like my brain was smart enough to project a different part of itself that it could talk to and get answers from. That's crazy. Like if that's not God, like that's magic. Like that's amazing. And so like I have this lovely relationship with my brain now where I'm just curious about it all the time. And the things that pop into my head, instead of calling it revelation, calling it from God, or calling my shadow self Satan so I don't have to work with it, it was all me. And
Yeah.
there's a whole universe in there that you could study for the rest of your life and still not get to the end of. And that's when like life just got, like, people will sometimes say to me, you're an atheist, so life has no more magic anymore, right? They just think that I just like read scientific journals and I'm just a robot. But like life is so magical as an atheist because our brains were smart enough to keep information from itself, or it
Yeah.
was smart enough to project ideas of idealism like God, and then through relationship with that ideal imagination, we actually became more loving or became more compassionate because we had this thing going on in our brain, or our dreams, or our thoughts, or the things that, like when you just get that moment where something pops into your conscious mind because your subconscious has been working on it for days. Like if that's not magic, what the hell is magic? Like that, all of
Yeah.
that is magical to me.
That is amazing. Yeah, the way you described it, it reminded me of Interstellar. You watched the movie Interstellar?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like that hit. I was crying, okay?
Mm.
The whole time Murphy, Murph
Mm-hmm.
was talking to something was trying to
Yeah,
connect with
yeah,
her,
yeah,
and he
uh-huh,
ends up in the black hole. Spoiler alert.
yeah.
And like
It's been long
literally,
enough.
yeah, if you haven't seen it, you're not a human, okay? But it was him all along
Yeah.
trying to connect with his daughter. And I know it's science fiction, but there's a sense in which our experience feels a bit science fiction, and like it's so surreal sometimes,
Yeah.
and you need to have that.
Reality is stranger than, like, Mormonism is crazy in the sense, like, our lore, like, is unmatched. Like, if you wanna know some Mormon lore, like, we get pretty out there. But, like, reality is even, I think, more wild than my early Mormon stories about what reality was and what was going on. Like, sometimes I'll try to shortcut into this space in order to help me feel that awe and appreciation. And one of my shortcuts is driving in the car, and I'll be listening to Weezer because I always listen to Weezer, and it'll just be like, I am flying through space on a space rock in a meat suit that has electricity in my brain, and sound waves are hitting my ear and making the meat suit kind of like move in this way. Like that's wild. Like that's
Yeah.
wild. That's magic. Like, and so reality is, especially with how little we know about what consciousness is and all of these things, like there's no, being an atheist to me, it was not an end to the magic. It
Yeah.
was just opening up to what like the mystery of what reality is, rather than just our stories about it.
So wild. Icy Pirate, thank you for the super chat. Do you personally think consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe, or emergent via random selection, evolution?
Yeah, I definitely would not say that I know. And the people who study this the most, talk about how mysterious it is. So I think anyone who says that they know, I'm very suspicious of people who think they really know what consciousness is. But if you put it like gun to my head, if you want me to pick a side, I think there's stronger evidence right now for consciousness being all the way down. So a fundamental property of the universe. And I listened to Annika Harris's 12-hour audio documentary on all the scientists who are working on consciousness and what they think. And it's tending towards that direction, that the hard problem of consciousness is so hard to solve, and so difficult, and we're having such barriers with that approach, that it's emergent, that it's starting to make more sense that it's consciousness all the way down, which is very interesting. Like I'm very, like, one of the very freeing things about living a life outside of building on truth claims is that I can explore all of this. Like
Mhm.
everything is on the table for me. And I love that everything can, like, consciousness being emergent, consciousness being fundamental, all of that's on the table for me. So I'm interested in these conversations. But I wouldn't, say that I know one way or the other, but I tend towards the idea that it's consciousness all the way down.
Interesting.
Which is interesting. Yeah, which is interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. A few more here. DJ Wilkins, thank you again, my friend. Is imagination a tool you recommend for secular spirituality? If so, in what ways? Meaning, I seem to need imagination to find Nietzsche's amor fati, love of fate, attitude workable.
Yeah, I do think that imagination is a fantastic tool for working with your own brain. I just think that we have to put some boundaries around it. So one that, for example, amor fati also has some stoic roots, that phrase. So something that I think is really cool in stoicism, for example, is there's this guided meditation that you can do where you imagine like a room full of people that you admire. These can be fictional, these can be real people, and you have a problem in mind, like who would you most want to talk to about your problem? And you really go into this meditation, you imagine it, and you take that person, whoever you would want to talk to, and you sit down at the table and you explain your problem, and then you're silent for a second and allow that person or Dumbledore or Yoda or whoever it is to kind of talk back to you. And it can be a way to access your own wisdom or access your own subconscious. What would someone I admire in this space say to me about this problem? Now, where I think religion and sometimes spirituality goes off track is they say that's capital R real. You are talking to God. You're talking to your saint. You're talking to your grandma, whatever it is. And I'm saying it works even when you're talking to Dumbledore and it's in your brain. Right. And so what I'm trying to do is like, I think religion goes too far in saying like all of that stuff in your brain is like capital R real. I think atheists are too dismissive and don't play in these spaces at all because it feels woo-woo. But there's a tool here of, it's a fantastic way to have a conversation between your conscious and subconscious mind that you can make rational boundaries around, and then go into this imaginal space. And actually, like I've done this before in ways that I changed my mind or I made a big decision after kind of doing this practice. And so there's lots of tools like that. There's fantastic tools for that kind of conversation between your conscious and subconscious mind. I just think religion makes it capital R real, and atheists don't do it at all. But there's like if you can brush the bullshit off of the tool, it is a tool, and I do think it is helpful.
Goodness gracious. Oh, this is so deep. This is really deep. I hope everybody likes this video and goes and subscribes. The Deadly Dan, again, thank you for super chat, my friend. A worldview is not a religion. Religion can be a part, but it's not necessary to function as a human, while culture and society is fundamental. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So like it's very hard as someone who is in the space of like the cognitive science of religion, because what people mean colloquially and conversationally when they use the term religion is not how that word is used in the academic space. And so in my space, like there are societies where culture and religion are not separated, right? Or like they haven't gone through an enlightenment where science and spirituality or culture and religion are separate. And we have like millions of different gods that we've created, at least, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of religions. And so to say that like religion is what we think of in America as far as like organized religion is just not the way that this term is used when you're seriously engaging with religion. And so like the definition of religion when you go into to study religion is that religion is how you orient yourself in the universe. And everybody does that. You can say that you're not religious, but I can look at your life and say, here's your core values, here's your rituals, here's your community, here's how you connect. Maybe it's nature, maybe you do XYZ. I could list out the things that you do in your life that we put under the umbrella of religious behavior. And so if people say like some critics will say like everybody is religious, I actually, as an atheist, don't have a problem with that. Like when you study all of the different ways that humans are religious and how they orient themselves in the universe and the stories and rituals and people and values by which they orient themselves and make decisions, everybody has to do something there. Yeah. And so to say that everyone was religious, I don't have a problem with that. my thing is that like I've built a life that is truly authentic to me and my values and gives me a lot of inner peace and wholeness and tools and joy, um, and doesn't require a lot of truth claims. So I have no problem with critics saying that everyone is religious, because I'm using this word differently than like just church, which
Yeah.
is kind of how we use it conversationally, especially in America.
I feel like a lot of those conversations typically are you have faith, right?
Right.
So now they're saying the
Yeah.
atheist needs faith, and of course,
Yeah.
when they talk about faith too, they have a double standard. So they like
Mm,
to say that you have faith because you and I believe. Well, if you take
yeah.
my approach, I tend to think just 9 out of 10 we've been able to kind of solve things without needing the God explanation, as that agent was actively involved as far as we could see. Now, if you want to say he's invisible and unfalsifiable and he's always been there or it has always been there all along doing the things, I mean, then for all I know, I've got a dancing elephant behind me and you can't
Right.
falsify it.
Yeah.
And, so I don't believe it. But they'll go, oh, you have faith that the universe, naturally before that, or multiverse or abiogenesis
Yeah.
or whatever, because I tend to lean in the natural explanation, right? But I don't know. I
Yeah.
lean there. They
Well,
they
and
want to
it's
make
like where you're building their grounding, right? Like you're speaking to, like they're trying to find, what are you having faith in to build your
right.
grounding? And when we're saying we have this different approach where we're not building from faith in a truth claim. We're
Yeah.
building in a totally different way. And that can be hard for a religious brain to see and understand the differences there.
Yeah, but they don't realize that in Hebrews 11, clearly the faith being used there is contrary to all the evidence. They
Right.
still have hope and they still hold
Right.
on. And it's like
Yeah.
Abraham's 99, right? Or like
Yeah.
Noah's
That is,
told
yeah.
a flood's
That
coming, but
is probably my favorite, like probably one of my favorite questions. I like the Canaanite question sometimes for Christian apologists, because I like them to squirm with that one, or like the genocide questions. But I also like the question is, explain to me why that faith that you were just talking about, where even against evidence you're going to believe this thing. Tell me why that's a moral virtue. Tell me why that is on par with things like love and compassion and other moral virtues we have. Like, why is faith a moral virtue? And there's really just not a good argument for that. And I know that because when I was an apologist, that was a question that I really struggled with.
right, right. Yeah, golly. One more here. Solera Knight, will humanity move beyond religion in your view?
No, no. Mm-mm. No, it's too we're too superstitious by nature. And then also, once you get that going, like religion taps into so much of our psychology that it just will always have more money and power and resources, because of really tapping into that dogmatic side of human nature. So I don't think humanity will move on beyond religion, which is why, rather than just saying to everyone, all religion is bad, all your beliefs are stupid, we all just need to be atheists, that's assuming that the world is gonna that it's possible that we could create an atheist utopia. I actually argue with atheists that, like, hey guys, believing that we can all, every generation, like there's never going to be religion, it, like, we don't have the data to support that humans are capable of this, like based on what we know about human nature. So to believe in atheist utopia for everyone is almost like believing in heaven. Like, we just have no evidence of this. And so I think it's actually much more grounded in the data to say religion's going to seem to exist. Let's make it as healthy as possible. And secularism is going to continue to exist and has a lot of benefits. And let's build up more tools so that people like Ayaan Hirsi Ali don't have to go to Christianity because they're struggling. And that, to me, I think is the most moderate, grounded approach that you can take as far as like the future of humanity there.
Hmm. And then Shirley and Hunt, thank you so much. Says fascinating conversation. You know what interested me in even having you on, and thank you, Shirley, was you did a video on TikTok talking about how evolution. You cited some source you probably know off the top of your head, where it's people who saw behind the curtain that see a little too much, that are typically people who don't want to have children, are typically people who are kind of going down this path of deconverting and becoming atheist, nihilist, if you will, whatnot. And nature itself has its way of culling these people from the gene pool to almost naturally get rid of them. And it kind of freaked me out a little, like
some of that is, I think, Donald Hoffman and then Robert Sapolsky building on Donald Hoffman, but they've run some computer models that show that when you start to see closer to reality versus seeing according to evolutionary fitness, your species will die out. And so evolution we're not evolving for truth. We're not evolving to see truth. We're not evolving to see reality. We may not be interacting with ultimate reality at all. Right. But evolution, with everything in this world kind of sees and experiences reality different. And that's not because of truth. That's because evolution evolves us for evolutionary fitness. And so if evolutionary fitness is the driver of this project of life, that means that if you tend towards nihilism, if you tend to want to break apart these stories, you're going to tend towards antinatalism, which is just not wanting the ethics of not wanting to bring children into the world. You're not going to be Mormon and Catholic and have 9 kids. That requires like a story, right? Yeah. And so evolution is really rewarding religion in various ways. It's rewarding religion. And so it's this weird place that like atheists get to where you say, I don't believe in God, I believe in evolution. But right. Evolution seems to want you to believe in God and religion to keep the project going. And so it becomes like this is where you get Rust Cole, he was a guy in True Detective played by Matthew McConaughey, and he quotes some of the darker nihilistic philosophers of just like, we saw too much, like we like people, like his belief was that people like him who live without these comfortable stories and this kind of dogma, that evolution never wanted you to see this much, and the best thing that you can do is just kind of like not have children and just walk out of life knowing that you weren't what evolution wanted. You saw what evolution didn't want you to see. And there's some matrix elements to that too, and it's a very interesting idea. But it seems to be that. So going back, I don't believe in the sense of atheist utopia. I think that there's this tension between truth and well-being, and that religion is going to continue to exist. And so I want to be hard on ideas and soft on people is how I try to orient around that.
So there's 2 things in my mind, and we've hit the end of the road on the super chats. Please hold your super chats. I don't want to keep Brittney too long. And then she goes, "Oh, the next episode we're stuck for 8 hours."
This is so fun. No, this
is so fun. As long as you're having fun, I don't want to.
I'm having such a good time. Such a good time.
So I wish something magical was true, and I'm not talking about just we're talking about nature itself already is magical enough. There's a lot of cool stuff, but like, I wish that the story didn't end when it ended. Right? There are things about religion that I'm like, yeah, I do wish either, some cool form of reincarnation was true, or some kind of like utopian, no more suffering kind of thing, problem of evil. Because we look at nature around us. So that's one thing, just a personal opinion as an atheist. I'll go, man, I've gone too far. I don't know how I could split my brain and ever try to do what Ian Hersey has done. Personally, with what I know, I don't know how I could do that. Number one. If I ended up in an existential crisis, maybe you can do almost anything you need to when you're literally going to die. I know that from addiction. But the other problem
is nihilism in the data, really bad for addiction. Really bad for addiction. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like, if you find Jesus as part of your recovery, those are the kinds of people that like if well-being matters more than truth, don't touch their faith.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the data shows, don't touch their faith.
That is the thing that I'm like, look, I've been aggressive critiquing and picking apart stuff, but I also want to say like, hey, if it helps you, do it. If you want to play make-believe, do it. I just think it's make-believe, and we're all playing make-believe in some ways. Yeah. It's just, I feel like, I'm playing less.
Let's not make sure let's not legislate the make-believe. Like, let's, we still have, even if I'm being very generous to religion, like I'm never generous towards harm, like we'll always call out harm and when religions cause harm.
I also am thinking of like the early Gnostics, right? And there's like philosophically a push toward antinatalism, the asceticism a lot of early Christian movements had. And people like Marcion, who saw the horrific actions of the Old Testament deity and said, no, Jesus is God, is a good God. That's not a good God. And you got to imagine a lot of these Christians were already saying, stop having kids. You're bringing them into a
Mm.
corrupted, horrible world that is created by an evil creator. They were already proto-nihilist in a sense and not
Mm.
realizing it. In some way, there's overlap, I would say. And
Mm.
they have this idea of escaping the chains of this world to
Yeah.
get to the next. Any comments on that? I mean, because we do see in the New
Yeah.
Testament one of the letters where it talks about women need to be like baby making machines to be saved. So there's like a pushback, a pendulum swinging
Yeah.
of like stop having babies to women need to have babies to be saved kind of crap.
Yeah. It's really interesting because I can see, like, when you see the fears driving human behavior, you can start to see where that tension is and where that pendulum swings. And so when you watch Buddhism, for example, also has some strands of nihilism where they break down illusion so much in meditation that you can get into some nihilistic spaces, and then they have their own tools for that. And so it's this thing of like, if you take these stories super seriously, it starts to lead to, well, why would I have children? Because it's possible as a Christian woman, if I have 5 children, it's possible that 1 or 2 of those are going to burn in hell for eternity. So actually, should I just not have children because I don't want to have a children that's going to burn forever in eternity because of their finite experience? Like, that doesn't make sense. But if you think about this stuff like too little, and you don't have stories that help you with life, then you get towards nihilism. And so the sweet spot, as far as psychologically, is having the story but not thinking too hard about it. That tends to be like when you find like psychological stability, it's you've got a story and you're sticking to it and you're not thinking too hard about it. Because when you start thinking too hard about it, then it'll start breaking down in other ways, and you can start saying, I don't want to have kids because I don't want to have a kid that's going to go to hell. That's a perfectly rational thought to have. But like, you can't, so you have to believe the story but not think too hard about the story. And if your brain can get itself to do that, you can essentially like, it's like putting blinders on. You can essentially
Yeah.
compartmentalize life enough that you can function. And what's interesting about like therapy and philosophy and these things is that they're at some level, the kind of nihilism that I'm talking about, it becomes a place where like actually some illusions would be psychologically healthy for you. You actually need some more illusions, like
Mhm.
illusions like being a good person matters, or the universe bends towards justice, or like some stories and illusions are going to be helpful for you psychologically. And so it's this really interesting place where, again, we go back to that situation of why is the truth good, especially when you start getting into spaces where it seems like thinking about this too much is going to be maladaptive to your ability to function in the normal world.
Mm. You made me think of like even that is a bit of a superstition. Like if I do good, then my life will get better and it'll help other people. Like just believing in that.
Hmm.
Instead, shit happens, right? And like so,
Hmm.
if we just believe, oh, I'm going to be successful and I'm going to do good, or life is going to go great, even if it isn't, or you don't know what the
Hmm.
future holds, is a good belief to hold, I think. And so,
Yeah.
like those
It's
kinds
like,
of
I think the one Sam Harris says is like, believing that the gun is always loaded is a helpful truth to live by, right? Like if you act as if and believe as if the gun is always loaded, that is, whether it's true or not, it's a helpful belief. And we're finding the more that we're doing this like postmodern deconstruction stuff, is that so much of what we thought was reality was just helpful illusions. And then what
Mm.
the hell do we do with that? And I don't have all the answers to that. I can only say that there's tools that can help you to process that and function, even if even if at some level that these are illusions.
last question I have is a
And then I
lot of
have one for you before you go.
oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Is about religion being replaced by politics, and I just wanted your personal opinion here because
Yeah.
religion is an identity thing. A lot of people identify this is who they are, and then when they
Mm.
leave religion, a lot of people, as I've noticed in the past 8 years in myth vision, gravitated toward active things that I think have real world implications and aren't just I believe in something and it's not real. whereas you actually can go vote and make changes. And I don't want to make this all about politics in depth, but just to simply get your opinion, why is it that many secular people, would you say, have made that almost to the point where that is their identity, and we're seeing a huge wave of that become the primary place they go?
Identity. Yeah.
Their identity. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
So it's really interesting that Nietzsche predicted this. So like the reason, like what people get wrong about Nietzsche often is like they think he's just kind of some broody, pessimistic atheist who's just like celebrating that God is dead. He mourned that God was dead and was very pessimistic about our ability to handle this idea that God seems to be dead here. And what he predicted, which I think, there's lots of things that I disagree with Nietzsche on, but one thing that I agree with him on, and that I think he was somewhat of a genius for seeing, 200 years ago, was this idea that in the death of God, this vacuum, there's going to be things that fill in the vacuum. And the first thing that's going to fill in that vacuum is political religions, where it functions like a religion, but instead of God at the top, it's going to be a man at the top. Now, I'm not going to tell you that like Stalin was a secular society. And I think a lot of Christian arguments about that are very wrong. But what you can say is that some of the decline of religion at the time left a power vacuum psychologically that allowed a political religion to take its place. And you can say that there was a vacuum there. And you get, Christopher Hitchens mentions this, that like you get the church painting halos around the head of Stalin, right? And so I do think that there's something happening, that as we get less sure that there is a God, and that even subconsciously and in our culture we're wrestling with, the vacuum that's leaving behind is that we're the unsurety that we're feeling, because now we have phones and I see that everybody believes in all these other different religions, and subconsciously that's bringing a lot of doubt, even if you're not consciously aware of it. And what that does is that makes you psychologically susceptible to some orange guy, not to name names, right? There's some guy who says, I have the answer. I will keep you safe. I'm on your side. I'm the Old Testament dictator now, And so we're very susceptible to that. And so I think if we do survive the death of God, like if humanity survives and we don't blow ourselves up, what was predicted by Nietzsche and other philosophers who were really studying this is that first we're going to have to psychologically, we're all going to become prey to political religions, and that's going to cause a lot of damage and a lot of bloodshed. And if we can get through that, maybe there's hope that we can do some rebuilding. But the first thing that we're going to do when God dies is turn to the first person who talks confidently and says, here's the plan. You're the good guy. These are the bad guys. It taps into all the things that religions do. And so what's happening in America right now, and this I did spend some time studying in my master's program, was that it used to be 50 years ago, let's say, that we were theological religions. We used to have debates. Like the best debates used to be Christians arguing which kind of baptism is correct. Like we used to really be theological religions where like, I don't want you to marry outside of the faith. Like the theology mattered. And as that grounding of God got more unstable, we started to cling to more political identities. And now, like in religious spaces, when we talk about religion in America, it's kind of accepted that we've moved from theological religion to political religion. So today, religious people would rather you marry outside the faith than marry across the political aisle. Churches are now splitting along political lines, in the sense that like the leftist Methodists who believe that gay people and women can be pastors or whatever go this way, and the other people go this way. And so like, because God lost ground, even though people sometimes don't even realize it, even sometimes just subconsciously, we are becoming more susceptible susceptible to political religions, and then wrapping our identity around our political religion, which feels a lot more strong than wrapping our identity around a theology that we can't prove. And we see that all other religions have their apologists too. And that seems a little bit less comforting.
Yeah.
And so now in America, we're no longer considered theology when we're doing religion. We're doing political religion. The only church in America that is able to keep hold a congregation with 50% Democrat and 50% Republican are the Catholics. And the reason that they're able to do that in America is, one, because the liturgy is like less based on the personality of the pastor, because you just have this collective liturgy, but also the power structure isn't here. So Rome, every once in a while will tell the Catholic bishops to knock it off, because sometimes it's like, oh, we don't want to give the sacrament to Biden because he thinks about abortion and whatever. And whenever Catholicism starts to get political in that way, the power structure, which is not here, which is in Rome, will tell us to knock the hell off. And so the only one in America right now that can actually healthily hold Democrats and Republicans is the Catholics, because they have a liturgy that's not based on the politics of the bishop, or the pastor, the way that charismatic, pastors are, and because the power structure isn't here. And so they try to stop that from happening. Everybody else is going to church mostly. And like, when I say everyone, like, I know you listening, like, you go to UU and you're a conservative and you're breaking the mold, but generally, like, we're starting, like, what matters in your church is, the religion supporting your political identity. And that's the same for your, the MAGA and the Trump voters kind of Christianity, but also for UU. Like UU, like if you have conservative values and conservative politics, you're probably not going to feel at home there, because it is acting in some ways as a political religion of the left. So anyway, lots of thoughts about that, but it's what Nietzsche predicted would happen when we start to see that this grounding of God is unstable. The first thing that we're going to do is cling to political demagogues. And the scary thing about that, going back to our kind of conversation on intellectual humility being atheists, is political religions can often be worse than theological religions. At least in theology, you're going to get a parable of Jesus telling you to be a nice person or whatever. But in political religions, sometimes you get all of the crusades and sometimes even the violence and the problems of religion, but there's no soul. You're never wrong. There's no mysticism. There's no spirituality. There's no nothing. And so, like, if I had to choose between, sometimes, like, there's certain political religions where I would be like, I would rather everybody go back to being religious. Let's go back to debating about whose baptism is right, because sometimes political religions can be worse. And I think as atheists, we have to be mindful and careful about our transition to secular states, that there's, as predicted, there's going to be some hardship along that road.
That's a can of worms, I imagine, for you. You have a lot more to say, I'm sure, just based on that response that you have. Right. Anyway, we did get one
more super chat, and then I have a question for you.
Ricky, thank you again, man. I can't wait to get your story too. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Another sandcastle built today. Thank you, Britt and Derek.
Thank you.
All
right. So my question for you, the question I've been loving talking to people like you about, and it's the question that I'm really crowdsourcing right now, is there's this split in the atheist community between how much magical thinking is bad. So I'll give you two examples. I'll map this out. I'm really curious to see where you're going to land on this.
Okay.
There's like a Stephen Fry camp that says that really enjoys playing in magical thinking. So one of his arguments is that he thinks that, for example, the president of the United States should have to do a ritual once a week where you walk up to the statue of George Washington and you have to talk out to George Washington what you did with the country this week or something like that. Some ritual like that would include some imagination and some ritual and even some magical thinking. And he, he's very theatrical, he's very story oriented. He's an atheist, but he really believes that like we shouldn't throw away all magical thinking because some of it is just like really helpful and really creative and it's part of human nature. And then there's this other camp, more like the Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins side, that will really talk about that there is always a cost to magical thinking, even ones that you don't see. So like an example that they would give is like, how is it wrong to believe that we have a soul? Some magical thinking there. They're not hurting anyone. They're not kicking gay kids out of their homes. They just believe that you have a soul, right? And it's harmless, right? People believe that that's harmless. And then when we start to want to do stem cell research, we can't do stem cell research because you believe that these embryos have souls. Or, if you believe in astrology and you do maybe some magical thinking there, there's an argument that anytime we do magical thinking, we're taking our energy and our resources and our mental capacity away from actually focusing on what the problem is and how to fix the problem. And anytime we support any kind of magical thinking, we're getting away from our ability to actually describe and solve the problem on the ground. And I see this split with atheists where some say, like, if it's magical thinking and not like overtly hurting anyone, then like we should be doing all of that and all of that's fine. And there was this really popular Reddit post that went viral that talked about like, what's something that isn't real, but you do anyway. And millions of people were like, when I come into a parking lot, I pray to St. Anthony to find a spot, and then I find a spot. And like all these little magical thinking rituals that people do. And so there's this split that I'm seeing in the atheist community where, is that okay as long as we just try to tamper down on the objective harm? Or should we be overriding that impulse because it's going to cause harm somewhere? Do you have thoughts on that?
Yes. Yeah, I have thoughts. And in fact, I did a reaction. I have another channel called Myth Vision Reacts where I just do reactions. And I came across the famous four horsemen seated at the table with, Christopher Hitchens smoking a cigarette every 5-10 minutes and drinking his whiskey. And it seemed that, and even among them, it seemed that Sam Harris was not as far as Richard Dawkins or even Christopher Hitchens on some of these things. So they all kind of disagree on this down to the nuts and bolts.
It's a split in the community. Yeah,
even in them. But you brought up Sam Harris and put him in with Richard Dawkins. So I personally like Stephen Fry's view better. The reason is I'm a primate. I live a narrative. I have a story about myself I'm living as we speak. Okay. I know for a fact that if I just became the mundane robot who saw reality for everything that it is, I can't. I don't know how. I just don't see us ever not being primates and knowing how to utilize the things we've evolved to be. And so I think narrative and story and that magical thinking that we see in Lord of the Rings and fiction that we actually have, art, like you said, you walk into a cathedral and see the art. For me, that wonder comes with some of that magical thinking. That imagination comes with some of that magical thinking. That does not mean I condone all magical thinking or think that we should, let all things fly. But I think there are things that are harmless. And I think there are some things that psychologically are beneficial. Something I personally, as an atheist, find attractive is ancestry worship. Okay. You see these really ancient customs where they honor their mother and their father after they're long gone and dead. They even have a shrine where they respect them. They still feel like they want to show respect to a tradition of their ancestors. And I think to myself, that's kind of a beautiful thing because when my mom and dad, both of my parents are still alive, but my wife's mom is stage 4 cancer right now. And we might actually have to go in 2 weeks and visit her, which is going to be rough on us. But I think to myself, like, we're so connected, we love them so much that I could see myself wanting to talk to them when they're gone. And I told my mom, she's like, my mom believes in Jesus to the point where she's like, Derek, one day Jesus is going to actually show you, right? She has hopes and believes. And I'm like, well, when it happens, it happens. But I'm not convinced it's going to happen, Mom. But I did tell her this. I said, I promise you this, when you're gone, I'll be talking to you. I'll be talking to you. I mean, that's my mom. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I don't know what else to say. I'm not God and I'm not a robot and I'm a human. And sure, we can go down that path and point out some of the flaws in this. And I think we should. We should always be critical. But I think if we take away that Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, fictional kind of magic that we play in, we are going to lose a sense of what makes us human.
Yeah. So my pushback to that would be like, I don't think anyone is arguing against imagination or storytelling. It's more when you kind of like add that superstitious element to it is what I'm talking about with magical thinking. Like, saying a prayer, but not really, maybe not really believing in it, but doing it anyway, or not being sure of astrology, but acting as if, you're whatever horoscope, whatever. And the argument that I've heard from more of the Dawkins side is that we need so many stories and so many superstitions in order to function. But if we actually just faced it and built a world that was built to just face reality and built a world that was like, how can we build this world for human well-being? Would we need so many stories to escape the horrors of what life is? And so the argument that some more idealist atheists say is that if we can get rid of all, like throw maybe even some of the baby away with this bathwater, then we could actually create a world where being a human is like growing up in Rivendell. Like a child is born to a community of people that love them, and we all share our art with each other, and it's all unicorns and rainbows, and it's like the like such a community and society that is built for how humans experience joy and thriving, that we can't get there if we just instead do all the magical thinking to help us cope with the bullshit. That maybe if we lost the magical thinking, we could change all the bullshit and make the world like Rivendell, and then we don't need so many stories about Mordor, or you know what I mean? And so that would be the argument there.
I think both right now are going to exist no matter what, which is what's happening right now.
But I want to see which way you lean.
Yeah. I mean, I lean with I would say both are pulling at me. This is the problem, because I do agree with what you're saying, but just like your deconversion didn't happen yesterday, it is a slow, gradual process. I think humanity is going to have to gradually find ways to cope and deal with. I don't think we could just hit reality, see reality, and then construct our stories. I think reality is going to be something we gradually are aiming toward. I don't think we can get there tomorrow. So that's why I feel like some of these coping mechanisms and some of these superstitions.
So then the pushback that I hope like is a good one, because I think it's a good pushback, is if you're playing a game where some imaginal thinking and magical thinking is helpful in what it means to be human, and also we all can't be secular tomorrow, there's a path to get there, then you're back to just being a secular Christian in Christianity, making Christianity better again.
Then I'm what?
That's the same territory. That's the same territory as like deconstructed Christians saying we're never going to have a fully secular atheistic society. We can't get there today. So we may as well use these stories that are helpful and good ways of using our imagination by trying to imagine us being more like Jesus. Then you get like what you just said would be what a deconstructed Christian who's just trying to be a good nuanced Christian in Christianity would also say. And then you just circled back to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's because I think, and you've seen nihilism up front and close, you've looked at like, where are we headed? Like, what if all of us saw things this way? And then would that be beneficial at the end of the day for society? So I feel like a tug of war goes on between you making me choose between the two options, because one side might go, okay, yeah, I see the facts are right. We're only organisms that have evolved on a planet. We're a bacteria on a planet that's actually destroying. If you just take a satellite view of any city and see the dark potency that we've caused this planet, And we're actually, if we gave AI a chance to really calculate, should humans exist on this planet? Do we really bring benefit to life? And should we not go extinct? And AI said, hey, I'm not a human. I'm not going to have a bias in this. Humans need to go tomorrow. I'm sorry, I'm biased as a human, and I think humans need to stay. But like, if you go full to reality and we just want to see it as say Richard Dawkins, who wants his cake and eat it too, give me the Christmas carols, but also let's see reality for what it really is. And it's like, okay, dude, even you are hypocritical in this regard. And so, like, I mean, if we really want to get, down to the brass tacks, AI might say we all need to go extinct. And we are all are a problem for this planet. This species should not be here. We're causing so much more problem to the rest of life. And nihilism becomes on the table. Like, I'm just saying out loud why I think it needs to be gradual. We need to find a way to cope and adapt and get there. But I still think we need a journey that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The hard thing that will happen in that conversation, because I don't disagree with you, is that I do think it's the best argument for religion. If I was going to argue the Ben Shapiro side of that argument, the best argument for religion is, if we want these societies that have culture and ritual and rites of passage and story and all these things, because that's what it means to be human, it may actually be faster and less harmless to get there through religion than trying to build up from the secular side. So, for example, secular Judaism in America, like, let's leave Israel out of it for a little bit. But secular Judaism in America sometimes leads these conversations because they've been able to do something that not all religions can do, which is that they've dropped a lot of their metaphysical truth claims. And it's actually not a problem in New York City to be an atheist rabbi. And you still get to have the bar mitzvah and the story and the food and the community and the identity of being a child, and I'm Jewish and this is what we do, and all of that is good. So if you're leaning that way, there is an argument to be made. Can we get there faster through deconstructing religion and us maybe going back into the religious space in order to be a part of that movement than trying to build it up on the secular side where we're experiencing some problems?
Yeah.
It's a good argument. It's a good argument.
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that at the end of the day. I mean, they'll say, even Richard Dawkins, I'm a cultural Christian, right? He says, doesn't believe in any of the magic. So he is kind of what, but I don't think he identifies as a Christian, but he's a cultural Christian. So he's kind of playing that game, I feel, in a sense. The problem is, as you said right now, like, people are shifting towards, especially with Christian nationalism, there's a whole nother wave where they're trying to make, like, theocracy almost realistic, if not almost really. They want a theocracy.
And we can't do that. We got to fight against that.
Exactly. We have to fight against that. So, but I have a lot of liberal friends who are academics, but they are Christians at the end of the day. And if I ask them, was Jesus wrong about the second coming? They'll go, yeah. Then I'll go, are there contradictions? Yeah. Is it human? Yeah, there's a lot of human, but they still have faith. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to touch a faith. They don't harm anybody. They're great people. I just don't have faith. And yet, where would I fit into your religion? I don't see the point of saying it.
But if we want everything that secular Judaism is in New York City, let's say, do you think 5,000 years of deconstructing Christianity and some of those truth claims, but keeping some of the culture and the holidays and stories and whatever, like keeping some of that, is that going to get us there faster and with less harm than trying to build something like that from the secular side, but building it from scratch?
I don't know.
It's an argument. I mean, it's an argument.
Yeah. I don't know, because the secular side is really trying to drive it, right? And I think they are doing it faster, right? For the people who enter that group are ultimately leaving Christianity quicker. The problem is are they actually causing most Christians to start deconstructing quicker? It's an odd. Or
are they fully replacing it for their kids? I would say the answer to that is no. Like, secularism hasn't, like, we've left it, but have we replaced everything that was good for us as kids, maybe being religious, for the next generation? Like, the statistics say no, we haven't done that. So anyway, I mean, we don't have to really choose a trolley for a track for that trolley problem, because for me, the answer is, like, we can do both. And I'm really, like, to end this, and this was such a fun conversation, but, like, my last words on this is, like, is like we have to be doing both. Religion as it exists and will continue to exist, we have to critique it so that it becomes healthier and help it to deconstruct and not just throw it all away. And also secularism is struggling in its ways and is failing in some of its ways. And if everybody could be like a really good kind of Christian that's not causing harm, or you be a secular person who has all the tools that you need for thriving, like that doesn't bother me at all. Like what we have to fight against is the fundamentalism and how that's happening in our country, especially, and then the nihilism on the other end. But if we can work in both directions towards a good middle ground, I think that's where we experience human thriving the most.
Let me flip it on you then, if I can, just because you got my brain ticking. Okay. We keep talking about Christianity, okay? And usually this is taboo. Many atheists don't like to deal with Islam. But Islam being a political religious system, that Christianity has like really lost that power that it once had as a theocracy and a system of religion / political religion, if you will. Not in the same way. It's trying to revive here with nationalism now. But my question to you is this. When I look at Islam and I see the women wearing the burqa, wearing hijab, they're covering their bodies. It's part of their culture, but it's also their religion. So it's part of their entire framework. And I think to myself, okay, I have had the heart. I'm only telling you my heart, because I've met Muslims who cried to me about this and said, listen, I'm not that kind of Muslim. Like, I want peace. I want gentleness. I think women shouldn't have to be forced to be covered in black robes, burqas and stuff. And then you have the Muslims who clearly want to control women without education. Go to Afghanistan, for example. In a heartbeat, you'll see the horrific things that are happening under the patriarchal systems that they have toward women. And I think to myself, my goodness, I'd love it to be gone tomorrow. But the other part of me is realistic, saying they need to hit an enlightenment phase. They need to hit something that's going to make them defang the radical insanity that I'm finding within a lot of these systems and the harms that they cause, the women especially, within those religious political systems. How do you view that? I mean, we just talked about Christianity because you and I are from a tradition of Christianity. But looking at that from the outside, what are your thoughts about Islam?
Yeah, I'm probably just gonna make both sides mad here. So to be fully transparent, I have a foot in both camps of your question.
Right.
So my association, which we haven't talked about in my story, but my association to mysticism and wisdom traditions is that I've had a Sufi teacher for the past 20 years, and still is someone that I refer to as a mentor. And Sufism is the mystical branch of Islam, so you don't do a lot of the truth claims and the problems, and it has been something absolutely transformational for my spiritual life and deep inner work and profound experiences. And I continue to see this mentor as a teacher of mine.
Yeah.
And so on the one hand, like, I do know that Islam can be a beautiful religion that creates a lot of generosity and beauty of spirit and deep inner work. And I've been doing that with a teacher for 20 years. And so I'm not personally experienced it. So I'm not in the camp of like, just saying Islam is just all terrorists, right? Like, right. I clearly have benefited from some of the tools of this tradition. And Muslims can argue with me that that it's not really Islam because it's Sufism, and that's fine. Like, I don't claim to be Muslim, so that's not a problem if you don't you don't consider Sufism part of Islam. But I just want to show you that, like, I have a foot in that camp that you were talking about. And also from studying religion, I agree with Christopher Hitchens when he says that Islam, there's aspects of Islam that make it a dangerous religion, in the sense that when someone, and I know everybody abuses their religion and uses their religion, but we have a chart showing how religions do, like, is it easy to do that in this religion, or is it hard to use this religion to abuse people. And for the reasons that you mentioned, because Muhammad was political in ways that Jesus and Buddha were not. Not to say that Buddhism and Christianity has never been nationalistic. Of course they are. But because Islam has a stronger doctrinal base for that, there's something there in Islam that is unique, that is making it very harmful for the future of the modern world, because not only of that, not just because of that political piece and Muhammad being political, but also because it really resists, even doctrinally resists critique. This is the only religion, when I critique it on TikTok, where I get death threats. I don't get that from any other religion I critique. If you do a tour of, you produced a book where you're critiquing Islam, even Ayan Hirsi Ali, she travels with a security detail. That's not something that I experience as an ex-Mormon.
Right.
And that's not just something that you can attribute to culture. There are doctrinal reasons.
Yeah.
So when we map religions as far as how easy is this religion to be abused, Islam and Christianity are in the harmful category of that. Some people say, why not Judaism? It's because Judaism doesn't tend to be as worldwide. They're problematic,
locally,
in their locally, but they tend to not take over the world. They want to be in their homeland, and they tend to not want to do a lot of crusades to take over the world outside of that. So they aren't put in the top category of harm, which is Christianity and Islam. And usually between the two, most people who study this and have data on this will put Islam as the one that, if you're going to cause harm, it's going to be the easiest to do it in Islam. That is not to say that all Muslims are bad. That is not to say there's not beauty in Islam, right? But there's there are elements there that make it particularly harmful. And then there's medium harm religions that sometimes align with nationalism. And then there's religions that are on the low scale, things like Quakers and UU and Jains. Nobody talks about Jains because they're very nonviolent people. It's very hard to do some, like, it's almost impossible to try to do a crusade through Jainism. They're so harsh on violence that doctrinally it'd be very difficult to do. In Islam, it's not that hard doctrinally to do. So, like, I get a lot of pushback on this, but like, I see both sides. Like, I see that there are unique things in Islam that are dangerous, and that when this religion gets threatened, because people will talk about the golden age of Islam, and absolutely, there was a time where the Islamic world was the pinnacle of science and philosophy. One of the problems with this religion, though, is that it didn't keep progressing after the golden age. Whenever it feels threatened, it reverts to fundamentalism, and we're back in the 7th century. And anytime it feels threatened, it has that doctrinal path to easily just tap back into very old world fundamentalism, that especially for women. I have hundreds of messages from women who are trapped in Islamic countries and in Islamic marriages, and just like screaming to the political left sometimes in America to say something, because sometimes the political left, in our fear to not be Islamophobic, which I understand is a real thing and was a thing after 9/11 and whatever, sometimes the political left won't touch this because we're so afraid of being called Islamophobic that we're not saying anything about some of the harm that goes against our liberal values and secular values. So, like I do both. There's beautiful things in this religion that I hope culturally continue, that I have personally benefited from and continue to benefit from. But I don't think that it's Islamophobic to say there's certain elements of this religion objectively that in the modern world seem to be problematic. And I think both could be true.
Golly, there's a lot there. You and me are going to have to talk again, honestly.
I know, this is so fun. Like 2.5 hours, that flew by. That was so fun.
Look, we had people literally
I can't believe we haven't talked before.
Yeah, I can't either. I was shocked when I came across your video. You really blew my mind, and I was like, my gosh, she's intelligent.
Why aren't we friends?
Yeah, like,
we're friends now.
We are friends now. And Solera Knight, thank you for the last super chat here. Every president ends the speech with "God bless America." What really does that mean?
It's just identity signaling. Most of the behaviors that we do is identity signaling to each other. So it's just an identity signal. And Republicans will do that, especially now for their Christian base, but sometimes even Democrats will do that to show that, hey, I still, because we very much in America distrust atheists. We're further away from electing an atheist than we would a gay person or a black, someone who's, well, we've had a black president, but a woman or whatever.
Yeah.
People in America don't believe that you can be moral without believing in God. So even on the political left, even if you don't believe in God, we do some God bless America stuff just to identity signal, hey, I'm a moral person. And hey,
Yeah.
maybe I'm not your brand of Christian, but I'm still good. And we're all on the same team here. So it's just identity signaling. And to Trump, for Trump specifically, he's just, signaling to his base there.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it is a way of like creating a myth that unites this umbrella idea that we're all under one story. That's a whole nother thing we can get into about myths and why they're significant.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, there's so much. Brittney, any final words from you? Because look, you told your story within like 15 minutes of this, 20 minutes, and we were already done. And we're already in the weeds, like deep in the weeds. So are there anything you want to say to the audience?
Yeah, if you so I know there's going to be at least one person who's going to say like, I'm struggling in the place that Britt's talking about. It's not going to be everyone. There's going to be comments on this video that's like, I left religion and I'm so happy. I don't know what the hell is Britt's going on about. And that's fine. But I want to say, like, if you're really struggling with existential crisis aspect of deconstruction, I'm not seeing clients right now, but I do have like a very extensive nihilism course that I do. That's everything that I would do with a client over a year. I think there's like 8 sections with workbooks. We talk about all the aspects of this. I give you all the tools and perspective shifts and philosophies and options. I have a ton of additional resources for what to do if your teen is like this, what to do if you're trying to explain this to your partner and you're in kind of like a mixed faith relationship, how to do this if like what's the intersection between nihilism and autism, like all of that ground. I spent about a year putting a pretty comprehensive course together on that you can find on my website. And then if you're curious more about what spirituality looks like without truth claims, then I'd recommend my book No Nonsense Spirituality, which has been in the top 10 for atheism since it's been it's stayed in top atheist as far as books on Amazon for atheism is doing pretty well, considering it was entirely self-published. So there are errors in the book. The most embarrassing one is that in one sentence, I was talking about oxytocin because I was talking about the brain, but I said Oxycontin. And so there are errors in the book. It's I just self-published it. I just wrote it from me. And was surprised that a lot of people really found it to be helpful. So check out the book for the spirituality side.
Check out the book. Check out her courses. Another landing page, all in the description. Subscribe to her YouTube channel on Let's Get These Numbers Up.
Still trying to figure out YouTube.
Yeah, we'll figure this out. And also stay away from Oxycontin. Anyways,
that's a good thing.
Yeah, right. If you don't mind sticking around, Brittney, just for a second while I give our outro here. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you do all these things. If you've enjoyed this deep dive, go subscribe to Brittney. She's on TikTok as well, Instagram, like all the platforms, and YouTube. Get a book, show support. I want to have her back again. I want to talk again. Future discussions. I already know, like, there's so much I can guarantee you we could get into and discuss and just have a great conversation. We both have hearts for humans to try and help. Just try to move toward a better world. And I think that's what we're all looking for. So I hope that you will be here for the ride. Subscribe, like, share this with a friend, comment your thoughts down below, and never forget, we are Myth Vision.
Son, do you want to know what the truth is? After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill and you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland, and I show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.